Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 2018 Board of Architects Review and Planning Board meeting. Tonight, the first thing on our agenda is a public hearing regarding Plateau Associates, North Water Street, also known as Hidden Cove.
Still have one for me, huh?
So,
We're testing your agility.
all
Right.
right.
You gotta be careful.
Can I get the control? Thank you. Not that I know how to use it. All right, good evening. Michael Zarin and Stamets, on behalf of Plateau Associates, the principles regarding Hidden Cove. What I thought I would do is give a very quick overview for the public who might be here for the public hearing. And I have with us the architects and the principal, and architects I'll introduce, and they can speak to some of the new architectural drawings that we've submitted. So this is the latest rendering of the exterior of the building that has been submitted to the village. So for those in the public that are not aware, and I apologize if this is getting redundant for the board and many of the members who have seen this slide going on maybe the third time, or as well as some of the others. This project has a long history of various reviews and modifications and further reviews and alike, and as you can see on the timeline, it officially started in 2008 with the DIS being accepted, and most recently we've had, since our firm has been involved, 3 meetings in February and April and May with the board, as well as we've made several comprehensive submissions, April 9th, June 18th, on responding to the comments of the site plans and comments on the final supplemental environmental impact statement. Tonight, for procedural purposes, is a continuation. Sorry, I'll get it right. Is a continuation of the public hearing that was opened on the FSEIS on May 22nd, as well as tonight is the opening of the public hearing on the site plan and conditional use permit. Recently, we made a comprehensive submission on both the draft FSEIS and the site plans on June 18th in response to the 17-page memo of the town's engineer, Kellard Sessions, as well as the public comments and the comments of the board members that were received at the May 22nd public hearing. For those that aren't aware, the Hidden Cove project is 137 rental units, including 14 affordable, a mix of 1-bedroom and primarily 2-bedroom units, 1 6-story building, 193 parking spaces, 147 garage, 46 surface, located on the previously developed flat area of the site, what is known as Lot 11. There is no development on the portion known as the plateau, the more elevated aspects of the site, which are known as lots 5 and 6, except there will be some road grading and possibly cuts, minor cuts on lot 5 that we had discussed and analyzed both in the FSEIS and our most recent site plan drawings. There's also road improvements to North Water Street and the North Water Street extension. This is a details of the site plan. For those in the public, you can see the proposed six-story residential building. I will allow the architect to get into more details on these plans. This is just an overview and aerial of the site. A major item throughout these proceedings has been the road and improvements to the road. It's always been part of the project. It's going to be improved at a 24-foot pavement, 4-foot wide sidewalks, new curbing, drainage, lighting within the 30-foot right-of-way. It will be brought up to specs, village specs and standards, which it is not now. It complies with all the fire department and public safety requirements. It will facilitate access or enhance access to Crowbucky Preserve, and as well as the nearby commercial properties in this area. And it will be utilizing various existing easements and other agreements that we are in the process of finalizing with the various property owners along this area. This has been the subject of a lot of the meetings, especially in prior years, and I think we've finally come to some consensus and agreement on these. These are the maps that sort of show the various phases to the road. This is what's known as the sort of the center road village lot. This is the portion of the road on the village's lot. Gray is the existing pavement. The red lines are areas that will be within the new 30-foot right-of-way. This is the center road on what's known as the Conga property. This would have involved a slight realignment of the existing pavement. And this is the road as it transverses through what's known as the Castle Plumbing and realigns the right-of-way on Castle to facilitate access to the site. Over the years, we have been engaged in various conversations with the board and Conga to potentially shift the road on the Conga property 25 feet to the west to help facilitate Conga's use of their site. We've analyzed this alternative in our various documents. Similar potential impacts, similar impervious fill, stormwater, site disturbance generally as what we call the center road alternative. But it does create a flexibility, and it is the preferred alternative subject to the applicant and Conga finalizing an agreement that they've been working on diligently. This is just a map or a drawing of the quote-unquote relocated or west road alternative. You can see the grayer area moves to the west, allowing the Conga site to be more holistic, if you might, and not have it bisecting any of the buildings or any of the existing functions on the site. At this time, I thought what I would do is turn it over to Vince Franzi from the Warshauer Architects, the firm that has been working with us on refining the drawings and the site plan, the architecture pursuant to various of the comments that we've received both from the public and from the board. So Vince, if I turn it over to you, and I'll come back and try to finish shortly. So this is
The scroll.
the scroll.
Thank you. I am Vincent Franz with the firm Warshauer Malusi Warshauer. We're the architects on the project. What I'm going to try to do is scroll forward. Looking for some. Here we go. So I thought this would be a good place to start because it's a broad view from a few different angles of the building, the development that's being contemplated because it just gives it some context with respect to adjacent properties, with respect to the river, the rail line, how it nestles. This is sort of a good argument for its name, Hidden Cove. It's kind of tucked in there, and its topography sort of envelops the building. It's nestled in as well as the fact that the slopes around it are densely wooded and sort of protect it. So, as if it's not obvious, the image upper left shows us the west facade. The building turns its narrow facade toward the river and extends back into the hillside. And if you can imagine the trees behind it being on its east, you can see how it's sort of shielded by its surroundings. And in fact, each of these, there's no arrow. Oh yeah, there is. There we go. So here, upper right, you can see how its east end is nestled into the hillside. And in each case, it's a good example from a broad view of how it fits into the site. Okay, so again, here is a perspective rendering that shows what the architecture is conceived as. This is the north face, or the front of the building. It is the architecture of of Hidden Cove is at the Hudson River, is conceived as being reflective of the Hudson River architecture, light industrial manufacturing architecture found up and down the Hudson River in river communities, including in the Hudson Valley, Ossining, nearby Tarrytown, Irvington. So it's not intended to replicate that, because indeed we are not looking to build a factory or recreate or replicate a factory, but the idea is that this building in massing and form is reflective of and harkens to that architecture from another time. But clearly this is an architecture of the 21st century, and it's not a factory. It is a place where people will hopefully live, and happily so. Let's see, maybe I can go another slide. Whoop. I'm sorry, the order is throwing me off a little bit here. Okay, here is a head-on elevation of what I was showing you as the front or north elevation. And it's conceived as three primary individuals, if you will. The massing is such that we have these anchors, these weightier elements, separated by glass connections. The idea being that it might give a sense of, the clusters of such buildings that, again, are found regionally, but unified by, this stone base that anchors it to the site. And the whole top floor, but for this middle section, which is intended to be, sort of give it some hierarchy, right? This is the biggest and most important piece, and then it sort of falls off, and the top story is conceived as glass. Here is the view, what would be the view from the river, or viewing it. This is its west elevation, viewed from the river, and and this massing turns the corner and repeats itself here and gives this narrow but strong west elevation. Off to the south, again tucked into the hillside, are the low-profile entrance to the parking garage, and further east away from us is the pool. Pool, fitness area and pool, which are, as I say, further east from this facade. Maybe a floor plan would help with that. So if it helps, I just made reference to the pool. That would be here. The river, I'm using my little mouse here, the river would be out here, but much farther away from the building. And so this is the west side. And this is what I meant when I said that the pool was further east or back from that view. Hard to tell in 2 dimensions. But this would be the pool and fitness area. The concept in terms of materials is that the base of the building would be natural stone. The anchors, as I refer to them, or these individuals, would be stucco, and this would be glass. The facade's articulated with balconies for all of the 2-bedroom units, on almost every unit, on 4 sides of the building. This sketch is a little light, but what it is intended to represent, hopefully it helps, is graphically, this reflects how the building is tucked into the hillside. So this is not a cross-section, but intended to be an elevation representation. The red elements are retaining walls. The green is existing natural grade. So again, the river would be out this way for this elevation. In this case, the river is looking beyond us. So the river's on the other side of the building from this view. So we're trying to represent here just how nestled into the hillside this building is. And the natural slope continues up the hill. I'm not able to stop. I'm trying to click around. In any event, that the idea here is to reflect the local history, be reflective of the local architecture, to find a way to honor it, but also bring it into the 21st century with an architecture that is respectful, that is integrated with the site and the region, but is also forward-leaning and something that is marketable and beneficial to the community. And we feel like we've accomplished that. One thing that I didn't touch on, which I should, John Fry, you were interested in the lobby.
I'm interested in many things.
Many things, as am I. And I have to apologize. I feel like this is not navigating as much as I would like it to. I don't know if it has a zoom. Anyway, let me describe it for you.
You've expanded it on the 2nd floor.
We expanded it on the 2nd floor, and it projects as a glass element.
Right.
It projects from the facade and has become, as you can see, within the context of the whole building, it is by no means imposing, but it is still a focal point, and we think that it will serve for wayfinding on this site, which is a bit of a destination, and traveling around the west side of the building to the north, which is its primary facade. We now have a 2-story element that will serve to give it an accent at its exterior, but also provides a 2-story entry space at the interior with an open stair that is a 2-story lobby, including the elevator, because one enters this building at grade level, but the main lobby is 1 story up. So we now have a 2-story lobby that facilitates both of those things.
Right.
And I think is also architecturally a real enhancement at the exterior.
Yeah, I would concur that's a step in the right direction.
I'm sorry?
I would concur that solving the lobby spatial issue, merging it into a 2-story element, all of those things work together. May I ask some other questions?
Absolutely.
Mr. Zarin standing up, maybe, is the architectural time up?
No, go ahead. It's important.
So one of
Just
the,
standing.
one of the notions when I was looking through the large-scale drawings, and I've already seen between several versions of renderings. The long segment, the westerly segment of the sidewalk, pedestrian sidewalk at the building base from the parking lot. I think that there are places in the drawings that I looked at here that it appeared to be the sidewalk was paved up to the face of the garage stone. And I actually put some question marks in here. Then I noticed on your drawings, I think they're more architectural drawings, the sidewalk was reduced and a planting area introduced. And then I noticed there are really two versions of the rendering, right? If you go back to this version of the rendering,
You want me to move back?
yeah.
I'm looking for it. Here?
Yeah, so there is what was my concern earlier in the week. But you began with the rendering, a much happier rendering. What was the first image you pulled up, Michael?
Just the cover, I think.
Same one.
Same
No,
one?
it was a different one.
First
You'll-
one I pulled
You'll
up.
see why.
Okay.
You'll see why.
That-
Oh, it's a little different there.
There's a sidewalk.
It's much happier there. And it's much happier for obvious reasons. Because the pedestrian experience there and the buffering to the parking lot is significantly managed by the buffer there, obviously. So I don't know, dimensionally, if you can accomplish this compared to the other rendering, but clearly, this is what I think you're gonna need to do, because it's technically a 6-story building, but it sits on an additional story that's exposed to that parking lot. So it's really 7 stories on the parking lot side. And not that it's directly germane, but we learned a lot from Harbor Square, right? Because it had a similar building typology in terms of the parking level, but they had a significant planting buffer on their parking lot side. And then they had an accommodating grade that rose up to the river and sort of made I think, a reasonable attempt to throttle that what was at one point a 2-story garage. So I think that's an important element here. I think intuitively, whoever did this rendering recognized it was an important element compared to the other one. Other than that, I think I like where this is headed. I like the next level of advancement. At some point, not only because you have essentially 2 stories of this material, that stone material, right, it's gonna be, what is that? Is this like El Dorado stone, or is this natural stone? What is the scale of the stone? It's an important element. If the landscape buffer that we see in this rendering is actually refined and realized, then I think you've accomplished what the other observation may be. If you go back to the raw elevations, where you essentially do have 1 story of all stone facade concealing the parking and the grade change behind, it would seem to me there's an opportunity there to do something, whether you introduce recesses or louvers or some element to those are my own questions.
So I've just been told by Paul Berthet, engineer, has done the site plan drawings, that the site plan, the formal site plan that's before you is reflective of this rendering, i.e. a 4-foot sidewalk and a 3-foot landscape buffering. So that's the formal site plan drawings that are before you. Correct. That's correct. All right, let me continue and I'll try to finish up as quickly as I can so you can open public hearing. What's going on? Okay, yeah, I got it. Thank you. Okay, so we know that this has been an issue a critical issue to the extent that this project and plan conforms with the policies of the village's zoning for the planned waterfront district, as shown as represented in section 270-23A. As well as the specific requirements of 270-23F. Policy aspirations being, we've gone through each of these in the FSCIS, the final supplemental environmental impact, per your comments, and they are spelled out in full. They provide. The project consists of residential, recreational, open space uses, which enhance the unique aesthetic, recreational, historic, environmental qualities of the waterfront area. The project provides certain amenities that would draw people to the riverfront and encourage public use and enjoyment of the area. Again, we would submit that 1.2 acre conservation easement that's been added to our site plan drawings with connectivity to Crowbucky, and I'll get into that in a little while, the open air pavilion. The commemorative open air pavilion and the road improvements do address both of those policy aspirations. 270-23A3 talks about water quality, and the stormwater management system would significantly improve the quality of the water that currently discharges into the Hudson River, as well as we avoid the construction on the steeply sloped areas by concentrating most of the building now on the level area and trying to minimize the disturbance of the plateau area, also protecting the scenic views through the perpendicular design. So again, we think we've complied and met the various policy aspirations that the code represents in 270-23A. As well as we discussed both here and in the FSCIS that we've complied with the specific requirements of 270-23F, including the width and open area requirements, the open space, maximizing the open space that I'll talk about, the photo simulations demonstrating the visual impacts, or the minimizing of that, and the way we massed and oriented perpendicular to the river, the story, the height complies with the zoning and alike. And the various preserve, enhance the natural ecosystems on the site to the maximum extent practicable. We also meet all the floor area requirements for proposed 1- and 2-bedroom sites. So again, Vince said that's the massing and the siting and the photo simulations to demonstrate that. This is an addition that we've made in our site plan, or a revision, per your comments. This is designating on our site plan a 1.2 acre conservation easement that will be granted or recorded on the land for, it's the green, dark green in the bottom. It's difficult to see, but we did include a connective trail from that area to Crowbucky that can meet the elevation at the Quabucky Preserve. We'll meet with the preserve at a later time to refine that as they deem appropriate, but we will record that easement on that property, and we did analyze it, and it does meet the topo of the preserve, providing access from the site to the preserve. Okay, so this is the issue of the tribute to the Brandlett Pill Factory. And we've put significant amount of time into this issue for all the obvious reasons. It was probably the most significant topic discussed at the prior meeting. We are not seeking a density bonus for this. This again is something that we believe is a benefit to the community. It will be a tribute to the Pill Factory. It will be relocated to the west side of the road. We modified our site plan accordingly per the request of the board. It will be available and accessible to the public. It's conceived as an open-air display structure that would include information images, materials, artifacts from the site, and the Ossining waterfront, and incorporate various architectural elements of the buildings that once existed on the site. It includes heavy brick masonry, gable roofs, sweeping canopies, exaggerated overhangs, brackets, lintels, and articulation, all of which are reminiscent of, inspired by the architecture of the region. We will, to the extent that we can, utilize salvageable original bricks for display at the site as part of the structure. We are committed to that, and we intend to design and include various display ideas. I did have a very brief discussion with Mr. Wunderlich this morning, discussing the intention, and we hope to do this in collaboration with the community, to really bring in the family history, bring in the history of this area, try to create a real destination. Obviously, some people would like more, and you can say it's not equivalent to the office preserving the office building per se, but I will touch on that in a sec. But we want to make it something where when people come down to the site, they will get exposed to the history of the site, and we will work on all the type of commemorative and educational ideas worked into this, and we certainly put some additional time into the architecture to try to enhance that. We also did have Mr. DeNardis go back out to the site and do a additional update of his 2012 report. Mr. DeNardis, that we presented to the board on Mr. DeNardis, is a 40-year engineer, structural engineer. He certified and stamped his report and verified, and he was pretty firm in his belief, and had photographs and the like, that this building, the office, is in disrepair, structurally unstable. The roof has failed, and it's his professional opinion that it would probably not survive a lifting, which would be required to bring it into conformance with FEMA at the site, as well as that it would not sustain any type of vertical or horizontal loading. So we did take this seriously, and we did bring him to the site. We have mentioned to the village, and we will record this, that we are willing to, and we made an appointment to meet with the Historic the HPC. We are willing to donate the building to anyone in the community, and HPC or others, that believe or think that it could be somehow relocated. If the village chose and would want us to donate towards that effort in lieu of the commemorative building that we're planning, we would consider that. But this is something that we don't believe is practical. But again, we're willing to work with anyone to see if it was, and to cooperate in any way if it was. We believe that it's, as I said, not we believe, our engineering people believe it's just beyond restoration or relocation, and presents a safety hazard, a current safety hazard. As many of you know, we have already, we are seeking the density bonus of 20% based on the two criteria: 10% affordable housing under the village code, and a commitment to 10% LEED Silver certification. Both of these are within the code, are sort of objective criteria. And we will work with, we included a LEED checklist in our latest submission per your recommendations and your comments. That's in Appendix 5-15. You might also see in your package and in the material that we sent to the board a in-depth analysis by our consultants on the comments, or response to the comments from the school district on the adequacy of the analysis of school children impacts. That memo is I believe it's a 16-page memo done by VHB Engineering, and looks at all the issues that were raised by the representative school district, and in the letter from the school dated May 22nd, it responds to the issue that they weren't notified of the project. It responds to the number of children. VHB went back and not only did the Rutgers study, which showed 19, but went back and looked at a number of very similar projects at Harbor Square, Avalon, some other municipalities that have relatively similar projects and alike, and found, which is being found in most districts, that when you go and you look at the projects of this kind, usually the actual numbers of school children are less than the Rutgers study, and that would be anywhere from 8 to 11 children, as opposed to 19 that we are using for our analysis. We also, VHB went back and redid the methodology, or showed the methodology used for evaluating the cost per school child that should be applied. It's the same methodology that was used and approved by this board for Harbor Square and for Avalon, Ossining. And that totals approximately $10,259 per child when you apply that methodology, and all that is spelled out in detail, which would leave a net tax benefit to the school ranging from $359,000 to approximately $535,000. Again, I don't think I've been to a project where, the issue, the analysis, the school children analysis has not been subject to some dispute. But again, we went back and we had VHB do an in-depth analysis and elaboration on the methodologies and the like, and these are all consistent with what this board has applied and utilized in the future. With respect to the issue of the cap and the legislative and the state tax cap, that I think was spelled out in detail by the representative school district, I would respectfully submit that that's more a legislative issue, and it's not one that is applicable specifically or alone to this project. It really involves school children impacts with respect to every project, and is really, if there's going to be a fix, it's a legislative fix with respect to how the tax cap operates. We would hope tonight, in light of the responsiveness that we've made to all the comments we have received from your consultants and from you. We've been to a number of meetings, we've made a number of submissions, that you could deem the draft FSCIS complete and authorize its filing and authorize the preparation of the SECRA findings. We believe that with respect to SECRA, we have provided you within the rule of reason, which is the standard of SECRA, the vast majority of information that you need to make an informed decision on this project. And we believe that at this juncture, that the draft FEIS can be deemed complete, and that your SECRA findings can be drafted and prepared. Again, you'll have an opportunity to accept your own findings and draft your own findings, but we've certainly have responded to all the comments, each and every comment that you've given to us with respect to the information. We still have a relatively complicated path to travel. Once these two, hopefully, thresholds are met, we have to go to the board, to the Board of Trustees for a referral on a special permit application. What's the project? Hudson Step did the same thing. It was, it's an interesting provision in the code. There's really no criteria for the board. It seems to be a sort of leftover from the old zoning, but they did Hudson Step receive an application October 28th, held the public hearings, and issued a special permit at their November 25th meeting. So it was not considered, they relied mostly on the planning board's SECRA and other findings. We need to file our application with the ZBA with respect to the interpretation on the road question that you are fully aware of, whether we're required to have frontage on a public road, and to what extent we have or we do not. We would seek an interpretation, and if it's a negative interpretation in accordance with your attorney's position on this, then we would seek a variance. We also, because of the relocation of a man-made culvert, we would be now 15 feet, the culvert, 15 feet from the building versus 25, and we would seek a variance on that also. Then we would hope to come back to you at your next meeting for adoption of SECRA findings and the close of the site plan hearing. Then go back to the Board of Trustees, because we cannot receive anything from the Board of Trustees until you have closed your SECRA deliberations. And then August 1st, hopefully they will hold a public hearing and make a determination on the special permit and Lot 6 easement. And then we would go back before the ZBA for a hearing and determination there. Again, we cannot receive a determination, and then hopefully come back to you somewhere the August 28th meeting, if you're meeting thereabout, and with the hope that we can get a site plan determination. Again, I think we've been responsive. We've done everything that you've asked us to do. I know this project has been on your plate for a long time. I hope we can begin to bring it to closure, and with that I rest and answer any questions now, or you can open it to the public hearing, I guess. at the board's pleasure.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question from Mr. Stout. Or Mr. Or the folks. So, closing procedurally, closing the public hearing doesn't infer that the planning board has concurred with the density calculation, or does it?
Closing the public hearing on the SFEIS?
Yes.
It does not. I mean, you can make that, if you close it and you want to make that point, you can do so. But closing the hearing, agreeing to the filing of the document would be concurring with everything that it says, but not closing the hearings.
I should mention, if you haven't, another modification we made throughout the FSEIS, per your request, is anywhere that there was an opinion on the efficacy of a statement, we indicated in the FSEIS that it was opinion of the applicant. So many of those issues and areas that you were concerned about, the record provides it's the opinion of the applicant, and it will be your respectfully, I believe, it'll be your findings that represent your determination, your final determination on that, based on the information in the record, which I think we've provided you with more than sufficient information to make those findings, depending on what your findings are.
So I have a question. Procedurally, I'm asking you specifically, procedurally, is this the process that you would suggest? If we still have an open hearing where we want to hear from the public, there's going to be very little time for us to really discuss amongst us what we have prepared for tonight with the plans, with your notes, and with the counter notes in terms of the changes both on plans and in documents.
So I think that assuming this is the same thing that I reviewed in a little more
Yes.
detail today, and I think it is, I think that the steps that are laid out and their order is fine. The timing is up to you.
Right.
Okay? But, whatever dates you put next to them is one thing. But as to the steps, I think, yes, those steps need to be taken. That order is fine. And so I'll leave it at that. But the timing is up to you.
Right, so the issue is, in my mind, at least, that there's a lot for us to digest. We have digested it individually in preparation for this meeting. And personally, I think after we have heard from everybody in the community, I think I would personally like to have a work session where we actually can go in depth with things that with issues that we may have, or simply just understand that we're on the same page. Is that an option?
Yes.
If I could just also maybe clarify my request, because I don't want it to be misconstrued. What we're asking for is deeming the SFEIS under SECRA to be complete, and then allow you to prepare your findings. We're not asking for a closure tonight of the public hearing, and we're not asking for any type of determination on the site plan. We're not asking for closure of the site plan public hearing or a determination tonight on the site plan. So that, obviously, we realize there's still issues for you all to digest. But I think as far as SECRA goes, we've satisfied and addressed each and every comment that we have received. And the next step would be for you to now prepare what you believe, what you think about what your findings are on the SECRA issues, not necessarily where you come out on final on site plan. That would be my...
So I would say to you that that, again, on the SFEIS, two things. One, as I've said before, even though it's a weird process, even weirder than the DEIS process, because the applicant prepares it, but it is your document, the statements are yours, you will be held to the statements, let's say the ones that are qualified as the opinion of the applicant, so you can legally be held to them as you agreed to that. You can't say something different now in your findings. So you want to be sure that what's in that SFEIS, different from the DEIS, are statements that are what is your view. As to the opinion part, that's your decision whether to leave it, take some of it out. But in each category, it's for you to decide whether you want to leave the conclusion of the category, it is the applicant's opinion, ... or whether you have a different conclusion. That's for you. That's number one. Number two, the filing of the SFEIS starts a clock on, a tight clock, where you then have, under the statute, now this can be agreed to be extended, but you have under the statute, like, 30 days to adopt the findings and make all other decisions. So you have to realize that when you file that document, when you accept it for filing, we'll call it, you've started a clock.
And as Mr. Stout said, typically, to move the process along, we typically waive and don't hold you to those strict. Any applicant just wants to keep the process going, so we're available and flexible in that respect.
I mean, in terms of the timing, I can see that we're running into summertime. There are vacations that people are gone, so it's a very ambitious schedule, if I may say.
It's ambitious, but it's been a long time in coming. I'm sure everyone would like to see this process move on in a responsible way, and we're trying to be responsible.
Here's the prey I was trying to get to earlier, in terms of, and maybe perhaps I asked it in a clumsy way. It appears that much of the substantive elements driving the bonus categories are integral to the site plan and the building. Specifically, let's take the building, right? Understanding what the meaningful lead contributions are going to be that yield the bonus. So if 3 months from now, or 4 months from now, we're still not in agreement that the refinements and the further development of the site plan or other elements that are part of the bonus calculation, we're still not satisfied that those meet the intent of the, you see where I'm heading?
Yeah.
So I would caution you, if that's the case, if you're not there, to not make any statement, either to hold, don't make any statement in the FSEIS that reaches a conclusion on that topic. Either don't file the SFEIS yet, or if you're ready to file it, don't let there be a statement in there that says something that might, puts forth a view of yours that might change. If necessary, just say, we haven't decided this yet, but we,
And to add on to that, does that mean, just for example, as a hypothetical, we could move on to the site plan issues, explore and determine what those are, if they exist, and leave the FSEIS open? In other words,
you could, if you think that in order to, see, the processes are really, at some point like this, supposed to come together. They're actually supposed to operate together. The whole purpose of the EIS document is to inform you about the environmental issues that are raised by the site plan. So they really are supposed to walk along together. particularly at a time like this. At some point, though, to make your decision, you have to file the EIS and do your environmental determination. So my answer to the question is yes, you could let them walk together for a while now if you wish, because you feel that you can't really make the statements in the SFEIS you want to make or you're not ready, because you need to examine the site plan. It's the notion that you finish the environmental and then you do the site plan is really incorrect.
Right, now that's where I'm headed.
They walk
right?
together. You finish the environmental before you decide on the site.
Right, I don't want to say, well, I guess my point is, we don't have to put off getting to the site plan because we're still working on this. We can do, instead of doing this in a linear fashion, we can,
They should be, in my opinion, at this point, they should be working together. At some point, you may be ready, you are or will be ready to finish with the environmental, but they, not only can you do it that way, it's really how it should be done.
I have a couple substantive comments. I don't want to interrupt this conversation we're having, but they go to the site plan and the updates to the document, so.
Let's get to the substantive.
Okay,
Right, and they-
so,
Go ahead. I've answered.
okay, well, I just want to ask, so the conservation easement, I wanted to ask, and this, like I said, it's sort of a site plan issue, it's also exactly what is the public benefit and how do you define this? Is it the applicant's understanding that this area that'll be dedicated with the conservation easement is, provides connectivity as an extending Crawbucky Park? Or, and I felt like this is sort of implied throughout the documents, but not explicitly stated, that this entire project is provide connectivity, whether that's pedestrian connectivity, to this access to Crawbucky Park, and if it's through the newly proposed conservation easement, how that would be facilitated. And then my other question is exactly how, if that's the case, how does a pedestrian traverse from Water Street through the site? Is it going to be marked by signage? Is there a walkway? I mean, right now the only sidewalk I'm seeing is right across the face of the building. So, I mean, maybe I'm not reading this correctly, but so how is that facilitated if that is part of the how this is going to be accomplished?
Okay, that's a good question. I mean, the plan at this stage was to continue in private ownership, but to the extent it could be available to the public or to the building through signage and paths, we would do that. I think there's an advantage also to the village if it stays in private ownership, only because it's our responsibility to maintain it.
You're talking about the part, the
1.2 acres,
right,
correct.
Right.
So
So it'll be private, but it'll have an easement so that it'll
correct, it will be a
its natural state otherwise.
recorded easement, remain in perpetuity, remain in its current state, remain as its functional use to be open space, to be,
So it's not getting the status of parkland, but it's.
correct,
But it'll have connectivity to what is the park.
correct, that's the current plan.
But that's actually an interesting question. Because getting to this parcel at the moment is predicated on easement.
On what?
Predicated on easements, right? And you don't, at the moment, have frontage on a public street. So we're gonna cross through all these properties where you have reciprocal rights to cross, right? Where it winds up, I don't know. But you have that right. But does that right extend to the general public? Because if it doesn't, we have to figure out how to make that happen for this to be feasible, right? So I think that's question one. We can start there. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jeff, but.
No, I mean, that's
on that
part and
point,
parcel of the whole thing.
Right, so,
Mr. Chairman, may I?
sure,
A number of years ago, Crawbucky was formally dedicated to the village.
right.
The entrance at that point was indicated and designated between Castle and Clearcastle, between Diamond Dairy and Clearcastle.
We can't hear you.
That was the official entrance. Whatever issues and access points the village undertook at that time, because it was an official ceremony, everybody went down between the two structures and accessed Crawbucky. That's the official access point.
So it's actually not.
Why are we not recognizing that now?
The actual official entrance is at the end of Beach Road.
I'm sorry, the ceremony occurred.
Oh, I know where the
on
ceremony
North Water
occurred,
Street.
but, and I can't pretend why they did it that way. But,
No.
But-
The
but-
entrance,
but it-
the entrance
but-
as was
but I think-
dedicated
but-
is far more publicly oriented, far more accessible to the public than any entrance through our property would be.
I think I understand the issue and the question, so let us go back and respond
Even if
to it.
all of that are accurate, and believe me, I know I was there at the
Yeah,
dedication.
Your question is, and it's a
I don't know if there's
legitimate
anything
one,
written.
what is the specific pedestrian flow, if you might, that takes the public to Crawbucky from this 1.2 acres?
Or
Who's gonna
even-
use it, who's not gonna use
Or
it?
even what your proposed amenity here, the.
Or what's the amenity to the building to
Right.
get people from there?
And the flow sort of from both directions, so if someone is in Crawbucky, using Crawbucky,
Good point.
coming onto this parcel and exiting, and then my other question was, if you're coming from North Water Street, is this intended to be any kind of access point, or can the public egress onto the site from, I mean, otherwise, they'd have to go through your parking lot essentially, which is,
But I think the point is that if we're gonna agree that this exists, there's gotta be signage that says it exists, right? And you can get from North Water Street to Crawbucky Acres.
Right, there should be signed, and this,
Somehow that's gotta be defined.
and the site plan. So we'll add that. There's grading issues, as you probably know in there, that we have
But
to.
I think that's not clearly articulated here either,
Okay,
okay? So we need to get.
fair
that.
enough.
The second one, is sort of a long question, I'm sorry. You ready to keep going?
I have another
You
question,
keep
but if
going.
you're on,
No, you keep going. Mine
I
is
guess-
on a different page.
this is the I want to just go back to it one more time, the existing office building, which the comprehensive plan identifies as a historic structure that the village would like to see preserved in some way. And I know you had Denardis Engineering go back. I guess my comment is, and my question is, if at any point, and I'm not, questioning Denardis's credentials as an engineering firm or anything like that, I'm saying, have you had any firms that specialize in moving historical structures who have a track record of saying, we've moved this many thousand buildings and this many buildings that are over 100 years old or whatever, who has a track record of moving historical buildings, look at it and say, if we try and pick it up, it's going to collapse? And I just sort of feel like, as far as the mitigation on the loss of the historical structures go, that's sort of the last missing piece of examining that issue.
Well, again, we went out and we retained a reputable engineering firm that does have experience supposedly in structural and preservation and the like. They did two now analysis with their stamp and seal, and drew those conclusions. Now, we are willing as a condition to our approval, and we're making this offer. If there's another entity that people believe, anyone else, that they think there's a possibility that it could be relocated to another, we will grant, as a condition to our approval, grant them that access and allow them to take the building. We can only do what you've asked us to do. We hired, we paid money, we went out, had him do a second report, an updated report, and it's his professional opinion that it can't. And it's not, again, it's not something we dictated. We made him put a stamp on it, we made him stand behind that, and we think it's a rational, we were responsive, we did it rationally. Again, we're willing to do a fairly, a meaningful commemorative that will be a destination. I mean, I know, I go to these, I'm a historical buff, I go to, various events or various, John J. Homestead and those things. I go right to these sort of commemorative exhibits with the signage, with the educational, with, the various equipment from that taken out of the plants and the like. we're willing to put some time, effort, and money, and we've tried to enhance it per your comments. We're going to the HPC, and we're gonna say to them, if they would like to try to, and they think they can, our engineers said they can't. We stand behind that, and we think we've been responsive to you on that. I mean, one of the things that I know that applicants typically say, and, you know, I apologize if it sounds, you know, rote in that respect, but it's all we can do is respond to your issues and concerns. And that's what we've done. We've taken every issue and concern that you've raised and taken them seriously and responded to it. At some point, the process has, you know, respectfully move towards closure. And I know there are going to be open issues. There are going to be things that you may have felt that could have been done differently or could have been done more or less. But we've added a lot. We've responded to a lot. We increased it. Your point on the 1.2 acres is a legitimate one. That I don't think we fulfilled our responsibility in really laying out exactly how that would work. We tried, and your points and questions are good ones. I think on the pill factory and the preservation of the building, we have done our job and responded meaningfully and responsibly.
I just have a quick question on the architecture. On your floor plans, A2, looking at the typical unit plans, the first two boxes on the bottom of that sheet look like they're one bedrooms, but the other 5 look like they're 2 bedrooms. Is that just a typo, or am I reading that correctly?
Can I see what you're saying?
They all say 1 bedroom.
Yeah, you represent them all as 1 bedroom, but clearly the 5 to the right they look to be 2 bedrooms, so.
Yeah, that's typo.
Okay.
That's just, yeah, every single one of them is labeled 1 bedroom. Yeah, no, they're not. In fact, the majority are 2 bedrooms in the building.
Thank you.
I have another question in terms of the office building. Let's say the village says that they would like to donate the $1, and there would be some kind of nonprofit group put together to preserve it. Would there be any kind of limitations in time, in your opinion, as to when and how quickly we would be able to amass the funds? It's a reality.
It's a reality. Probably, you know, it's a number of months, if not longer, from the time we get our approvals till we get the construction drawings and pull the building permits and get the Department of Health approvals and the like. So it's not tomorrow. It's probably more in the range of multi-months. So I would.
Let's say if we were able to do the dollar exchange and the village board would approve of that, the certain conditions from the community, whatever they may be. That would also mean that you would at that point try to maintain the office building at a status quo as it currently is, making sure that the windows are closed or boarded up so that we don't deteriorate even further. Because if that is the case, I'm certain that there would be going bids out for historical restoration companies to come in and do that. I'm just thinking, can we then say,
let me
freeze it?
go back and talk about what that would include and involve.
Okay.
Boarding windows is probably not that big a deal. Preserving a roof probably is a bigger deal, but let me check. If there's a real possibility of that happening, again, one of the things that I said, if this board and the community feels that, look, they'd rather work towards preserving and relocating that versus this commemorative building, then there may be available resources to put towards that. And that, again, bringing it to finality, I mean, that could be and John goes to your issue, most site plans, as I'm sure those of you that have been on the board for a while are aware, have conditions, numerous conditions, contingencies, and other conditions, so.
Let's take that to sort of try to close in on what we're trying to close tonight. So if we were to change the text and focused on preservation as the number one issue, right? And Plan B is when through all good intentions, it starts to move, it falls down like the firehouse did in Peak Street. Right? We can always do Plan B. You're gonna have a lot of bricks though. So if, and in reading the ordinance, it actually does talk about preservation. So this is probably the one place where we could at least say we made a legitimate attempt to preserve something. So, let's leave that one open, because I think it's important. The second one that I think we need at least a paragraph on, and I can't find it, if it's in there, I'm sorry, but it talks about mixed use. Clearly, this is not mixed use. So how would you characterize why that's not possible? Or is it possible in another way, right? Because this is written for the whole planned waterfront district. I don't think we can do that, I'm not sure every single parcel has to do that, but somehow the master plan has to be achieved, right? So, and if we go back to Harbor Square, there's a 5,000 square foot commercial facility that has a restaurant. So they kind of map that. The last one is one that you actually addressed it in Leeds Silver. But the ordinance says for bonuses, you have to be LEED Gold or explain why it can't happen. Okay, so again, I think we've gone down a rung before we've examined why it can't happen. And since this is our document, we need to make sure that that's addressed. Okay, I'm saying if it can't be gold, we got to explain why it can't be gold and why it's going to be silver. Okay. So those are sort of my three things that I think are elemental to getting us to deal with the SFEIS. And I do agree with Kaya that we should have a work session where we can get those answers done. So we don't, I really don't want to go through the summer with keep churning over this thing. I think there's been significant progress in getting us to this stage. I'm actually pretty happy about that. But I think that when I look at these items, and I even went back in the book, and there's one where you just say we have 137 units. I'm not sure that addresses what the intent of this was. So explain, I think it needs more than 5 words. As to why, and the mix, and how you're going to achieve, and how that targets the population, that's going to improve the economics for us, and there are a whole bunch of things in here that I think you need to examine our conscience. Okay. I don't think it's a big deal. I just think that they're sort of missing.
No, I don't think it's a big deal either, and we will definitely address it.
Okay.
The only thing I would ask, and there's no way meant to be negative or disparaging. We will respond to the issues that you provide us. Just as all we would ask is that, please, if there are issues, get us those issues now so we can respond and not show up at the next meeting and then have more issues. That's all. That's all we ask.
But in fairness,
Yeah.
there are a whole bunch of people behind you yet who may have other questions that, quite frankly, we haven't thought about.
I'm sure there may
I
be.
mean, and in fairness, we spent about 8 months trying to figure out how to get into it.
I understand the history.
Okay, So I think we're making real progress. It may not be as fast as any of us would like, but we're going to be careful about this.
I appreciate that.
Okay, so
Open
with
public
that,
hearing.
any other boards and administration? If not, let's open it up to the public. Please give your name and address, and if you represent an organization, sir.
Hello, Mr. Steinmetz, how are you?
He's fine.
Good. Oh, he's fine, right? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity to appear before this board and to make some very brief comments. I do have my comments in writing, and some of them, and I would like to submit them to enter into the record as soon as my brief comments are over. I am not a history buff. I'm actually a preservation specialist. I have a graduate degree in historic preservation. I also have a master's degree in history. So it goes beyond being a buff. And I would like to address this whole issue of the, I'm formally a member, by the way, of the Historic Preservation Commission. My term has expired. And during all this entire process, I have always recused myself from any votes or any discussion with regard, official discussion with regard to this project. Let me say that this plan, or this, that I have experienced this before, as have you. Many times you do see a developer coming forward with some very nice drawings, but you know, if, in effect, that the drawings and, in fact, the document that they submit, the EIS, DEIS, and all its various permutations, is essentially a document that is a prejudgment, if you will, of the developer. It's his document, and of course, it is something that he wants you to adopt. So there's a self-interest there, which I'm sure you recognize from many times before. The pictures and the drawings and so forth are very pretty, but again, you've seen over and over in your experience here as board members, as I have, as a village official, that these drawings never really turn out to be as presented. They're just a basic representation, and I don't think the public should really take these seriously. For example, in this picture that you see here, they showed it in various different ways. One of the things that you don't see there is that I live directly behind this building on the top there. I don't know exactly the height of this building, but I've heard 6, 7 stories, 8 stories. But this building, I will be looking into people's windows, or they will be looking into. They haven't told us exactly, you know, what the height of this is in comparison to the cliff, in comparison to where the. That's just kind of a brief example of how these drawings are manipulated by developers. And you know, again, you've all experienced this. So I think you should, of course, take these drawings and these documents, which are prepared, by the way, by the developer, who hires lawyers, and we've seen here in this example various teams of lawyers. Different lawyers have come before you on this project. So every time something happens, a new lawyer comes in, you know, to explain the project, and a new team of architects and supposedly environmentalists come into play, and they'll write canned answers, 2 or 3 sentences, and they'll check off a box. And you're supposed to make a decision, okay, because this document is supposed to be a decision-making project for yourself, based on representations that someone else makes. And it's a very dense document, it's a very complex document. And in a sense, you know, we're all laymen, you're a layman. You're a certain, with some exceptions here, we do have some architects on the board. So you're making a decision based on, you know, you should really be making a decision based on your best interest. What is in the best interest of the Austin community as opposed to what is in the best interest of a developer. That is really the criteria when you come right down to it, what you need to do. Okay, getting back to, for a moment, to the historic preservation aspect. I recall being involved very heavily in the Capelli project, Capelli-Ginsberg project. And as you know, there was a fishing shack there, the Gordine Fishing Shack, an iconic shack that people from the whole Hudson Valley came to learn from this man about fishing. Now, we were promised, it was a promise, if you recall, from the developer, that he would take that shack apart, board by board, and mark each board, and reassemble it, and it would be installed, it would be incorporated into the present restaurant down at the waterfront now, 3 Westerly. Well, you know what? The developer hired a house wrecker who came down and said, knocked it down, and made it a big pile of wood, and everything that was in there was destroyed. This promise to build what looks to me like a highway rest area, okay, shack, is just as empty as the promise that Capelli and Ginsberg made to incorporate the Gordine lot. So be aware that when they make these representations and vague promises, this is not in writing, okay? We made a big mistake with Capelli. We didn't get that stuff in writing about the preservation of the shack, so that's not going to happen. Now, the buildings that are there, the reason it's in bad shape is because there was neglect of the building over the years. Over the years that this developer has owned those buildings, he has neglected them. He has not put a dime into preserving them, not a dime. So now it's in bad shape and says, oh, we can't save it because it's a wreck, because it's this, because it's that. No, be aware that there's a reason why it's a wreck, okay? Because it was allowed to happen. You need to take that into consideration. Now, there are, in fact, if you go all over Europe, and even right here in the United States, there are preserved ruins all over this country, okay? Preserved ruins, that's a thing that happens. People, believe it or not, they go to see ruins, okay? Go to Greece, go to France, go to Spain, okay? Go to Massachusetts. There's a factory there that's a ruin, okay? And it's being used. Now, there are people, okay? If he really wants to do a good job here, and it shouldn't be on you. It should be on his dime, okay, the developer's dime. Take those, if he wants to move the building, if the village wants to move the building, they can be moved and they can be replaced, okay? That's a very small building. It could be rebuilt. It could be restored, okay? It could be restored to its former glory, okay? So I hope that you take that into consideration. The opinions of the applicant are exactly that. They're just opinions and nothing else but opinions. So what you hear here about, oh, we can't save this building, oh, we can't do this, or we got, okay. Now, with regard to the point that was raised, with regard to Corbucky, I'd like to say that that's just a very vague promise about how they're going to connect. How are you going to get from North Water Street and Snowden Avenue, how are you going to get to Corbucky, okay? There really is no plan for that. You haven't seen it. They haven't shown it, okay? So they need to absolutely, if you believe that this, okay, I'm not against conservation easements. They can be a good thing. Now, the road hasn't been discussed tonight, but I understand from the last meeting that there was a discussion about auxiliary road. Well, to build that road, what's going to happen is they're going to have to take down the cliff, the escarpment that is in front of my house. Okay, they're going to have to take part of that down. Now that escarpment has stood there for thousands of years. It is a natural feature. Natural features are every bit as valuable as, much more valuable, Mr. Chairman, much more valuable than an asphalt road that's going to perhaps be used or not used. So I think you need to look at that issue of the escarpment and how that road is going to be built, okay? Now, the escarpment, okay, if they really wanted to do something, that escarpment should also be an easement to that, and it should be preserved as a natural area, and he can get a tax break for that, okay? The federal government allows for that. So there are many, many options that the developer and his team have failed to present to you as to how this project could work. Okay, this project could work, okay, but they're not looking at how it could work in any deep way. Basically, they want you to act quickly, take the building down. He already took down the historic building. Okay, you know that, okay? This was a building that was on the National Register, it was on the State Register, and it was on the Village Register, okay? This developer failed to follow the process. He failed to come before the Historic Preservation Commission and tell us what his plan was. We could have advised him, had he done this the right way, how this project could have been done. But instead, he chose to ignore the process. Okay? So I think based on the record, whatever you're told, take that, and I'm going to finish now because I've been going on a while here. Take that with a big grain of salt. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think there were some other folks.
So good evening, everyone. I'm Ray Sanchez, Superintendent of Schools, and I want to thank the Planning Board for this opportunity to speak and actually for the time you take on, I don't know how often you meet, but the time you take to really consider each of the projects and the impact it has on our school district and on our community. I just want to share, and I think we have submitted a 10-page document that reflects some of the concerns of the school district. I know the district attorney was here at the last meeting. I unfortunately was not able to attend, or else I would have personally shared some of those concerns. But just to highlight a few, and certainly the document shares in greater detail. You know, some of the concerns we have are the general communication that we've had with the developer, the lack thereof, respectfully. It's only today that I believe we received an email, our attorney received an email response from Mr. Zarin. The accuracy of the numbers is something we'd like to discuss in terms of yield and the impact it would have on our school district. It's very well documented. I've come and presented to you in the past the capacity issues that our school district is facing. I wouldn't say just our school district, that our community is facing relative to its schools. And we'd like to really discuss even further what that is, and then the financial impact. With all due respect, the tax cap is something that when we meet with and have met with various developers, there's a clear understanding that yes, it is legislative, but it does have an impact on our school district. And the finance associated with additional students entering our school district, the issues related to capacity, and other mitigating impacts that are going to have as a result of increase in number of students and then potentially on our community as a whole. And then just in summary, we've met with a variety of developers. Everyone's worked fairly diligently to come to the table, discuss, and really understand the capacity needs and the issues that the school district has faced within that. Again, and I shared this earlier, there's been a clear understanding of the tax cap, which was referenced in there, and of course it's legislated. The issues and a deep understanding around the enrollment and the capacity issues, and certainly the impact it's going to have on our overall community potentially as relates to our schools. So I want to thank you for the time, the opportunity to speak to you, and then also for the opportunity to submit in writing and in greater detail some of our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else come to speak? No further comments. Okay. Brian, you
Oh, just, I didn't prepare a written memo for this meeting, just with the time constraints of when we received the submission. But we did go through the documents submitted and our memo and kind of just did an itemized checklist, you know, went down our comments and did look for the information in the report. And there has been substantial improvements in developing and addressing our comments. But with that said, we still haven't done a comprehensive review of, okay, yes, we gave us the numbers we asked for, but are they consistent with the site plan? So we still have a little more technical review to do before we could provide a written memo.
Brian, would you say your review is more focused on the engineering aspects of the project or planning as well?
Both. There's about 55 or so comments we had just on the EIS document itself, not including the site plan engineering part. So just to advance for tonight's meeting, I looked at just the report. And as the applicant stated, you know, I would say about 90% of what we asked for, including language used, numbers provided, they had advanced their document.
But you have not had a chance to cross-reference.
Right, and kind of like you brought up before with the site plan and make sure it all jives together.
We, if I could, Kellett Sessions has been given, first of all, I know they've been loaded on with additional work in the planning as well as the engineering, and had to step up and have stepped up. And we really appreciate their comments, and we realize how important they are to the process and to provide the board with the you know, thorough review that they've been giving. I guess the only thing we'd ask is that if they could please get us the comments sufficient prior to the next meeting so we can respond to them, and again, bring this to a closure. It's very hard. We tried to get our comments in by your submission dates for the reason that they're going to be supposedly reviewed in time for the meeting, so we can continue to progress. And I know they give us amazing comment letters, and we spend significant time responding to them because they're usually good comment letters. They're on point. They bring up the legitimate issues. We would just ask, as far as timing goes, if they could try, please, to get us those comments sufficiently prior so we can respond in a timely manner.
So we might be able to help with that, because we're going to have a work session. And we will need it for that.
Appreciate that.
There's also one more. Now that we are sufficient, now we've had the hearing, we've heard from the public, there's enough information for us now to hand this off to our Environmental Advisory Council, who also needs to weigh in. And you probably all may or may not know, for a while we were, but now we have one. So we now have to pass.
Pay reduction because we're.
They did. They cut our salary in half. So.
I'm sure you do this for the big bucks.
Can we get that wrapped up if we were to
I'll
target?
I'll communicate with the chair so we can get something on for July.
Yeah.
At this point, I'll speak with the chair tomorrow so we can do that.
So we should, let's try to decide if we can do this Wednesday before the fourth Tuesday of July.
Can we do it before the 18th?
I don't know what that is.
I mean, because I'm leaving on the 18th, and I will not be
Well,
here for the meeting, and
I had
I
a
will not be
calendar.
here on the 1st.
The Wednesday before the fourth Tuesday, what you said?
That's when the planning board.
Before the 18th?
Yeah, it can be any time before the 18th. So I'm taking
So
the plane
the
at 8 o'clock.
Wednesday before.
Or, but because, it might not
It's
work.
the
for you. That's
18th.
the third
No,
one.
we just have.
The Wednesday before the fourth Tuesday is.
Is the 18th, yes, I know.
Our meeting's the 24th, so we're saying the Wednesday
No,
before.
we can't, because that's the third Wednesday, and Stewart's.
We wouldn't even be there.
All right, no, can you be there?
I'm away 2 weeks starting on the 9th of July, but I think my associate Steve Rabel, you in town?
I
on the 13th, 15th, or 13th, 16th, and 17th, but otherwise I'm around.
Can we meet,
We
it
could
doesn't
do
have to
it-
be on a Wednesday,
Well,
right?
I'm just picking a day that, we can't do it the 10th because we have the.
That's right.
10th. We're all.
Gonna overnight the tenth and then.
Well, if we had another room, we could be
I mean, get
zoning board.
11, 12, 13th?
You can't.
I'll make dinner if it's the 13th.
That's actually an
You wanna
idea.
do this on the 10th,
Right?
since we have to be out
Yeah.
anyway?
I just need to have PAC, that's the problem.
Wait, what?
So you're saying before the joint meeting with the
Yeah.
zoning board and the village board?
Because they have a regular zoning board calendar, right?
Right,
It's
Right.
short, but they do have them.
So during that, we could have a work session.
yeah.
But it's not here.
It's gonna be at the community
Yeah,
center.
there's plenty of rooms. Well,
John, you were
somebody-
trying to move this downtown.
Right, I'm
Somebody
excited
will
about
figure,
that.
somebody will
I'm just
figure out.
reminding
how to do
everybody
that.
it's not here.
Yeah.
My only concern is getting EAC, but I'll talk to Jeff Smith in the morning.
We have it
See if
down
can do that.
Well, we have it downtown. We can meet in my office, we can meet at 16, we can meet at the downtown
gone.
stairs.
At the community center.
You're not
Well,
around the
if we meet
15th,
at 16.
Not around the 13th, 16th, or 17th,
but you are around the 15th.
which is a Sunday, I believe.
Yeah, right, let's just do that.
I didn't want to suggest Saturday, but
No, I think we have to do it.
Okay?
10th, but
Yeah.
should we allow more than an hour?
6 a.m.
That's a lot.
We can start at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Does our joint meeting with the ZBA and the Board of Trustees take place after the ZBA's calendar?
Right.
Yes,
So can we start our work session at 6 or 6:30 or something?
yeah,
Yes, Chair.
that's what we're just saying.
You're
Yeah.
already on it.
Even allows me to get there
Great
from
minds.
You're
working
Okay.
together
So we're good. All right, okay.
I mean, I'd rather have that, we have half an hour to sort of breathe between that and the next and to rush
So-
into something.
So the fact is that we have a whole agenda to get through. Some people can go home.
All right, thank you very
Chairman,
much.
one point
Yes.
of order. I don't know when you last extended the time for completion of the SFDIS, but you may want to push that
I think
forward.
it was till July, so I think the last few did till July, so we're gonna have to probably push that. Because I think it was to the end of July, July 26th or something like that. But it was a July date, Jim. if I
You
remember.
So we adjourn the public hearing.
You can adjourn the public
We
hearing.
adjourn the public hearing.
Yeah,
Second.
second.
Favor? Aye. Okay. And a motion to move the completion of the SFEIS to whatever that August Tuesday is.
August 28th.
August 28th. Michael?
Second.
Walter, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Night, everybody.
You got my wrong there. Like
Jamie, is it possible that we can get water, pitchers, and glasses here? Right? This thing I just knocked over, because we're sitting here, we're tired.
You need to come prepared.
Oh, no. Yeah. I need to come here, however. That.
All right, I guess we don't have,
Doesn't look like there's anyone here.
okay. All right, so, do
36.
we have anything for 40? Dave, anything for 49 Spring? Okay, zoning board. Zoning board, 36 Broadway. Yes, under the 36, Debbie, are you, who's 36 Broadway? Okay. Applicant is seeking to remodel existing two-family house with additional bathrooms, open floor plan. Okay, so this is BAR, so what's happening inside?
Yeah, what was described was actually a lot more than what is really of interest to you, I think. What we're asking for is to just add a couple of dormers and a roof deck to the rear of the attic.
Because of the steepness of the site, and I'm the architect, Reese
Okay, so
Meyer.
let's start with that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Jamie, you have her name?
It's the owner, Peter Chernoff. Because of the steepness of the site, you really don't, and all of this is really happening on the rear, you get you're gonna have very little that you can actually see from the street. This is from the street in front of the neighbor's house, and this would be the, where the railing will be for the roof deck. And the dormer is actually set back a little bit from the overhang, so this is about how much overhang you'll see. And then up here, you can see the tiny little bits of the dormers.
So that's all you're doing?
That's really all we're
Yeah.
doing. We're putting dormers on the back of the house because this section of roof is higher than the attic floor. And I can't get my 6'8" door in without putting a little tiny.
The house is, you
so
see
we're
here,
doing the
is way,
tiniest
way, way
thing
up on the
possible.
hill.
Yeah. it's pretty familiar with this.
So this is the original roof line, and the dormers just poke up here a little bit, and you can see this just keeps that same roof line. So I don't even know if you'll be able to see it from the street, but.
Don?
I have a problem. I think there's something peculiar about the way that Eve is drawing on the dormers, but I don't really get
Okay.
bogged down in
Materials and siding, roofing.
So they'd already started siding the back of the house with charcoal gray hardy board,
Yes.
and that would continue around with white trim.
Good. All right. Okay. Very good. Motion to approve? Yeah. Will, sir?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing has been a world record.
All right, we will adjourn the Board of Architecture review. We'll move on to Arcadian. This is the one we just extended.
Yes.
So, you're here to just get an extension of the approved site plan?
Yeah, they already approved site plan.
No
Just
changes to the plan?
No changes in the
Everything
site.
else the same?
Yes, sir.
For
seeking-
how long?
Another year?
1 year? Okay.
I mean, is there intention to ever build this thing, or is it just?
Yeah, we were going through, we went through a bidding process.
Can you identify yourself?
Juan Yepes, JMC, on behalf of Orzabito Properties. We prepared construction documents, and we went through a bidding process. The issue was the building has to be built in piles because of the bearing capacity of the soils. So it brought the cost up than what our client had in mind. So they're still finding the balance between finding the good tenant that could occupy the space and the cost that it would cost them to build this building. So, you know, they're working on finding the right tenant for the space.
Yeah. Okay. So this is only the first extension?
Correct.
Okay. So, the motion, Walter?
Yeah,
Michael, second, all in favor?
Yeah, I agree.
No. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any movement on the code avenue?
Zoning Board of Appeals denied the requested variances, so
I'm sorry, shouldn't have.
Well, you
It's
can't.
only been going on for 3 years.
so that's where we are.
He denied it.
Yes, they did.
Okay. 25 North Malcolm Street. Victoria.
Good evening, how are you? Some housekeeping first. I have I think 19 more Jamie Green receipts that came back on the certified mailing, which means we've gotten about $200 worth of bang out of our $660 for the certified mailing. I do understand, though, from Mr. Kahan, that that's the one time we have to do it, and we're not going to be spending $660 each month for the certified mailing, but I think about maybe 26 or 7 of the 99 people that we sent to have returned the document. I did have a question concerning, before I get into and turn it over to our architects for the rest of the presentation, about the EAC. You know, my memory's not exactly firm on, we did go back to
You got
the
approval
second
from
time.
the EAC.
So,
The second time, with you did with
we
the
did go s-
revised site plan, when you went to 90, you appeared before the EAC, I believe it was in October of
yes.
17, and you got, and they were fine with the plan.
So is there any further reason with this reduction in square footage to go back again?
Let's see.
I would hope not. Let me preface it by saying that.
So my suggestion would be is that there's a document that they wrote,
Yes.
that you respond to that document and indicate that there have been no changes to this, and if they want you back, you go back.
I haven't seen that document yet. I think as of the last meeting, we
I
didn't have it
think, I
yet.
think all they did was, they stated on the record that they had no objection at that time when we had at the forum. But I think what I can do is, David, I will let them know that you were here. It is a reduction, in fact, from the prior size, and do they wish to basically opine any different way?
And if you want to give me any contact information, I'd be happy to send a letter along. They were very courteous to us last time, and...
You send it through to Jamie, she'll get it to all the members.
Sure, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Got it.
All right.
No, Jeff.
Yeah.
I'll touch base with Jeff here, right?
Yep.
To let you know, as we go along, possibly on the, maybe at our next meeting, we'll have prepared for you, as we did in December, and I think that you liked the format of that document, the updated secret tabulation document that makes a comparison and findings, and I think that document was in a good format, and was appreciated, so we'll submit another one like that. I believe that we should be ready for that for our next meeting. In the meantime, one of the things that we took a look at, and I'll turn it over for Mario Tesorio from Perkins Eastman to address, is, John, you had made comments concerning, I think it's, and sometimes my geography is a little off, but on the southeast elevation, I guess after you look at the building, the left corner facing it from North Malcolm.
And southwest.
Southwest. I thought it would be east, okay. You know which corner.
Downhill corner.
And we took a good hard look, and he'll explain, what was viewed and what we tried to accomplish. The matter of fact is that we're stuck in a footprint. And so there was no room to go, to move it along the hill, to change that. It appears, and I'll let Mario speak to that the elevation is substantially the same as in the prior approved one. So I think we're left with a couple of alternatives to address what are, I think, maybe visual concerns. And it looks like that the way we can do it, and it's not as a way of trying to cheat the calculations, but the only practical thing that we can accomplish is really soft, copious screening, as well as if the board thinks that there may be some utility in it, use some of the fill on site from the construction to bring it up to, again, it's not to change the calculation, because we know that's not really used in the calculation, but to lessen a
Let's get
visual.
right to the practical
Yeah.
solutions.
Well, those are the two. Landscaping and grading, but now I'll turn it over to Mario from Perkins Eastman, and any other questions, I'll be right here. Thank you.
No need to revisit why you can't get there. Let's get to the practical solution.
Okay, so let's go to, can we flip to page 2? Oh, okay, yeah. Flip 2-03, and that set of drawings that we.
Do you want this one, the elevation comparison? Don't you?
Yes. Okay, so on the top two elevations are the North Malcolm elevations, the east elevations as we're calling them. The very top is our 2018 proposed. The lower one is what was previously brought before the board last December. Because we changed the footprint of the building to accommodate our budget goals, the building has gotten longer, so we are further down the hill. And you can see the comparison there. Let's go to the two elevations below that. And once again, the top elevation is the proposed elevation, and below that is the elevation that we previously brought before the board. There's on the top elevation, which is what we're currently proposing, you can see a dotted line showing the previous elevation. Our elevation is actually appears to be a little bit lower because it's further down the hill. The width of it is much more narrow, and we've tried to break down the scale further through changing the materials and the window layout. The big difference between the two, and why when we looked at the view shed, it appeared to be larger, was the fact that in the previous scheme we had a negative corner. Where at the end of the gable, there was the white portion that Joe is showing you right now was set back approximately 20 feet. We no longer have that. We have a flush condition where the whole elevation of that wing is essentially flush. There is, the gable ends come out a foot or two, but we don't have that 20-foot negative corner.
And it's closer to the street.
Well, the building is, the front elevation is the same distance off the street as it was in our previously reviewed scheme. We are no closer to North Malcolm.
Oh, then I misunderstood that diagram.
No, this, you're correct. This-
Oh,
this
oh, yeah, that
corner-
elevation, yeah,
This corner is
it's,
closer.
yeah, it's closer. Okay, but the North Malcolm elevation in
Do
general,
we have those elevations in our?
yes,
presentation?
these were
Yes.
submitted in June.
I'm just trying to see. what
And
we
they should be in the complete package.
June
Yeah,
That
they
was the
should-
one The one submitted
So-
for last meeting, for the June.
No,
for this
no,
meeting.
it was submitted this.
We're still in June, so it
Right.
was submitted June 9th, I believe.
Yeah, June 9th or
11th.
11th.
11th, yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't see
They're
that.
They're not in here.
It may have been a separate sheet, since it
Well,
was, most likely it was a separate sheet.
I mean, we just don't have
Yes.
it, so this is the first time
Well,
we're looking at it.
No, I apologize.
The building, so we get it, right?
But yeah,
You can't change the building.
Should have been
We
It's
saw,
supposed
at
to-
the last meeting, we saw what you're describing.
May I, can I approach for half a second? I have what was the electronic submission, and this did come across, and that's why it's upside down, as a separate sheet, so I think it's somewhere within your submissions. 'Cause this came out and printed up upside down, which tells me it was separate from the rest of the electronic submission.
But we have it up here, so.
Yeah.
Well, but that still doesn't mean that we have now to look at it.
Okay,
And we haven't been able to look at it before, which is problematic.
I apologize. So, this is where we're at.
This is the same as we saw
Well,
visually at a previous
Well,
meeting.
The upper
Right, the
elevation is the same, but we didn't have the 2017 elevation to compare it to.
Okay.
But what he's asking is from our last meeting.
Yes.
It's the same visual.
Yes.
What you're you haven't changed anything in what you're
There's,
proposing?
we're really trapped in the footprint. We can't move further up the hill.
What are the practical solutions?
The practical solution of
There's
landscaping and grading.
Landscaping.
And where do we see those demonstrated?
We are working on the landscaping to respond to your letter of the 22nd, so we're going to submit that
For the next
for
submission.
the next submission.
Just a
which is
few days
July
ago,
11th.
we got
We
the
just-
letter from Mr. Tremelli, and that will be submitted, annotated, and indexed.
Do the solutions include the methodology you used on the previous game, which was creating those stepped planting
Yes,
galleys, if you
Yes.
will, that kind of a cascade?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll see those next time.
you'll see them in the 3D, and you'll see them in the landscaping plan.
Okay.
In fact, do you have the civil plan?
Yeah, the civil plans are here. I'm looking for the, that's not in here. The three-dimensional.
While you're
The
digging
view shed
around
should be
there,
here.
I have to say that I'm a little disappointed in the architecture.
What's,
It just seems very, straight lines, vertical straight lines, horizontal lines. There's no, if you look at the comparisons, it just kind of is plain. And it's a big,
the front elevation, the North Malcolm elevation, I think scales in a similar way.
yeah, but there's a much softer sort of treatment of the roof line, et cetera, that, you know,
Well, it looks to me, anyway, my
The-
layman's eyes, and we kept, the same main tower, we kept the same gables and roof slopes.
There's a lot of shed dormers up there.
There's no secondary roof pitch at the end.
If you gave, right, it's, I mean, it is what it is. If you gave the windows, it assigned them a letter, a note,
Yeah,
and you assigned the pairs of windows A, right? You got you're playing the same note many times across, right? And if you go down to the lower elevation and you assign the window composition, A, B, C, D, right? I mean, then it's a complete, there's some fairly fundamental reasons why I think people are, while board members are reacting. And then it's the volume of the base of the building on the downhill side, which I think probably this diagrammatic elevation doesn't do you any favors, because you're gonna build these cascading planters
right.
in front to mitigate that, but it is a different building, it's a different building.
I mean, the massing of the mulled windows that I see here, and on the previous drawing, you had, as if you had sort of a, almost, a pushed-out bay, also with mullioned windows. I mean, there's much more variation in the lower one than you have in the top. And it looks like, yeah, it looks like cookie-cutter windows.
But I would, in your defense, or in defense of this, or defense is the wrong word, as a mitigating notion to this discussion, the fact that the building has this V shape to it, and some of the other site plan elements, which are a little different, will mitigate some of the broadness of it. I really do sense that.
I feel that the three wings are, they're scaled smaller because they're narrow. So, I don't know if we have the other elevations, but,
So, you know what, we're probably not gonna get too deep
Right.
into this tonight. People wanna take some time. So
Right.
have you gotten through everything you wanna tell us?
yeah,
tonight? Okay.
I think so.
So it's really about this, the street elevation, and how you're gonna mitigate that, the building height, and I think, to reiterate, you know, these are very abstract elevations. I think sharing
Yeah, it is.
as accurately as possible the 3D.
Okay, we'll give you some 3D views next time.
And I just want to share, because I know you're well aware, I think that maybe Ms. Gamm was not here at the last meeting, maybe when we did a more of a presentation to explain that this wasn't a reduction because.
No, I'm completely aware
Yeah,
of the issues.
how we were forced
how
into
you were-
that
I
reduction.
understand that completely.
Yeah.
I was really just speaking to the architecture.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. We'll present.
I do think some of the other views, as Mr. Fry indicated, will look a little softer with the way it comes off in a V, two-wing aspect. I mean, of course, the first
Okay, so
iteration was huge.
I think we got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll see you
All
next
right.
month.
Thank you very much.
All right.
49 Spring, that's ZBA.
You're up. We get some synergy going.
Work with them or something.
We have received comments from client session, and we're still going through those comments, trying to address the engineering aspect. And we did, as you are required, we did show the layout of the two lots, and we tried to clarify what the easement will look like. And the layout in itself has changed for the parking lot. We're still dealing with, we have proposed to relocate.
Yeah, subdivision.
Sightline adjustment as well as.
And the snack shop lot has
Oh,
a new
hello.
layout. Parking and canopies, building, location.
Yeah.
Well.
That's a lot of parking.
Hello. Talk to us about this, JB.
Well, we have changed the entrance here. DOT has requested us to move the entrance to align with the traffic light, which is going to have us relocate the bus stop there. What we're trying to now, we're creating two separate entities, two lots, as we discussed the last time, which has led us to recreate, and we have some comments from current session. We're going to be redoing some of this parking lot, reducing some of the pavement, and turning some of this parking around to reduce some of the pavement here and we will show, like we done originally, and we will show for this new layout that all the traffic maneuvering, all the truck maneuvering is possible with this new layout.
So this, and so the new fueling island position and surrounding paving for access and circulation and the building location was driven by new entrances and exits, or it's driven by something else?
Is driven by the new location of the new entrance, keeping the existing entrance, the curb cut. There was the original gas station.
Right.
If you recall, the original gas station was here.
Yes, I agree.
And also by the, now, as you recall from the last time we got this approved, by moving the shift in the property to this side.
Right.
Because of the easement or the shared driveway. And now we're trying to separate this into two lots, where before it
Okay.
was.
So not to jump into this, but I think the downside, the downside for you and the applicant, for my seat, is you know where I'm gonna go with this dialogue, right? We went through it the last time, and which was, we're recreating the 40s, 50s, and 60s in terms of fuel island design, and here we are again with an opportunity to maybe move the building to the street and the fuel islands behind. Even, it seems now even more potentially there than it was before, and I know you resisted it before, but, and we left that in the rearview mirror, and I was not happy about it, but we moved on. But here we are again, and now I'm like, okay, I don't know how, I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I can give you a forecast.
So
That's where I'm gonna be headed.
So we could short circuit this. Why don't you do a pencil sketch of what that might look
I have some good examples around the country.
like?
Right. And don't forget, when we will do that, but don't forget that also we have the drive-through, so that's gonna be.
You could still have that, if the
Yeah.
building were moved to the front. You could kind of get your donuts while you got your gas.
Donuts and gas.
So, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's just, I know the
No, I
rest of the
think
board
it's,
may
I
not
think it's
feel
actually
that way.
reasonable.
Yeah.
Asking a lot of the building owners.
To just do sketch.
No, to do it that way.
Oh.
To
What was
put the
that?
pumps in the back. That's just a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, because you don't drive down, you don't see the pumps.
See the sign.
Yeah, but you've got
But
three
you-
other.
But you really care about.
You do
how
have
much
three
the sign
others.
says.
But
The
still,
price.
you have three
That's
other
There you go.
gas stations right in the road
I
there.
would drive in the
So
backyard.
it's, yeah. I mean, that's the question.
There's
is
something
that-
said about consistency.
Consistency lends to good planning, even if it's bad.
Wow.
That's all right, Walter, I'm gonna show you some examples.
I will,
And why
All
not,
right.
why
We
not
gotta-
put the
we gotta do
building
this
up?
anyway.
Why not put the building up on the
Anything else you need
side
from us tonight?
instead of
No,
all the
should
way in
have
the
that.
back? I mean,
Okay.
there are ways
I'm
that.
sorry,
we-
JB, but you opened this up.
yeah.
You rolled down your window and the bee flew in.
All right.
If we get this approved,
So we're gonna
once we
adjourn
get this
for
approved, I
tonight.
won't come back again.
Oh, yeah. Write that down.
I'd like to see what it looks like the other way.
Okay,
Yeah.
moving right along. Snowden Holdings,
No recent submissions.
nothing new? Okay. Did I skip something? No. Maintenance Management, 185 North Island Ave. Is 185 North Island?
Good evening, Mark Pilato, Prime Engineering. We were here last month adjourn for the EAC feedback, I guess, for the board.
Okay. Did you receive the memo?
I
from the
did
AG?
receive a letter dated June 19th, 2018. Did the board receive it?
Which letter are you referring to, sir? This is a June 21st letter from the EAC. I want to make sure that you have that.
I have a June 19th.
You may have gotten a slightly earlier version. Okay.
Same thing.
Yep. Okay.
I guess I'd like to go through each of the points. I don't know if you have a slightly different one. Mine has A through F items, and then for
1 through 4?
yeah, 1 through 4. I'm not sure what if 1 through 4 of F, I guess, is what they are.
Let me give you mine, just so that, because they're all working off a slightly different one, so I don't want you to be caught off guard.
I appreciate it.
Because I know we have someone from the EAC here as well to talk.
Just bear with me as I try to compare the two. Looks like the first page is identical. I guess items A, B, and C are duly noted. They're sort of just statements. Item D. Also appears to be identical to my June 19th letter. We recognize the EAC's concerned. I guess my only statement to that would be the plan depicts what the disturbance will be. The disturbance actually to the existing slope was pretty minimal. It was only about maybe 10 feet into the existing slope. I think the disturbance that has been viewed by the neighbors and discussed was really where the trash enclosure was. You know, we just went minimally past there wherever we had to sort of grade to make it meet.
Can we go back a couple photos? Who's got the wheel there?
So I think the real point of the EAC was, what do you do with the detention basins in the water?
I think we're putting in additional detention, additional dry wells.
Where's the water going to go?
It stays on site.
How?
It stays in the dry wells. I think there was some mass confusion about what was actually going on. There were 2 dry wells there existing, and I guess I'll present this.
Can you go up one photograph?
I'm going to submit this document here. It wasn't previously submitted. This is a 1966 as-built plan of the station, which depicts the existing drainage system. I don't know what we have to do to submit that into the record.
Is that right?
Yep.
So tell me, what's the spec? Are there special regulations for how you manage surface water runoff that goes into a detention basin that stays on site, that's in a gas station where there's prone to all kinds of environmentally unfriendly things going on?
I think that's conjecture. The fact you're making the assumption that the runoff going into these dry wells is contaminated. The fact of the matter is they're more prone to semi-volatiles rather than the gas itself. Semi-volatiles come from petroleum products such as oil or diesel fuel, but they also come from things like asphalt roof shingles, asphalt paving. So
I got it. And you got all of those on your site.
As well as
But the question is,
every other
was a
road.
simple question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are there any other, is there a different set of regulations that how you manage stormwater and any other runoff at a commercial facility like this versus my house?
I am not aware of any. And I would even submit that the person on the EAC, basically, obviously had a concern and did a lot of Googling and, came up with an organization, the American Geoscience, which didn't say you couldn't do it, just recommended against it. So basically, they couldn't find any regulations to say otherwise.
If I could just jump in, I mean, the village follows the New York guidelines. And while a gas station is considered a hot spot, so they don't recommend dry wells. In this case, there's been dry wells since 1964, 8, whatever this as-built shows. So as far as his proposal, he was expanding the use of dry wells. Now, in my experience, there has been ways to pre-treat the water before it infiltrates, a filtering practice, a catch basin insert, to remove the sediments, hydrocarbons, and things, that's more concentrated at a gas station before it infiltrates into the ground.
Again, I think a lot of that, I'm not saying that there aren't contaminants there, but I'm not saying they're no different than they are at a shopping center. If gas were to spill,
I think that's right.
it's typically only a few ounces when you dribble it out, right, when we're all filling it, right? That runoff evaporates. The inlet for the dry well from the pump is over 70 feet. It's underneath the canopy, so the chances of it running rainwater while it's raining, washing it into there is less too. So I think we recognize the concern, but this isn't any different than any other gas station.
No, well, regulations change, right? I mean, you're burying tanks too, right? And there's some requirements when you bury a
Absolutely,
tank, right?
yep. There's
Do you have
monitoring,
that
there's spill
sampling
containment.
wells around the perimeter?
I'm sorry?
Are there sampling wells around the perimeter?
Existing, I think,
No, but, I mean, is there a requirement to put them in?
no, only if there were perhaps a spill.
How would you know?
It would have to, when they close out the tanks, if they remove a tank, which they did approximately 2 years ago, when the tanks are removed, they do an endpoint sample of where the tanks were.
And they were clean.
Yeah, they were clean. Years and years ago, 50s and 60s, gas stations they put the piping in steel in the ground. They rusted. Today it's fiberglass, it's double containment, it's double walled.
That's what I want to hear.
There's spill containment when they fill the tanks. There's sensors that tell you if there's a leak. There's monitoring equipment. Years ago, when you filled up a tank, a guy actually stuck a measuring stick in there and went to a chart and figured out calculated volumes. Now it's all computerized. They still stick the tanks, but they also check it against inventory. And the profit margins on gas aren't that great, and they're not interested in losing inventory to the ground, as well as all the environmental concerns that brings up and bad publicity. So
You said that the dry wells are not
I'm sorry, can I just make another point? The dry wells we're proposing weren't our idea. We had dry wells, and there was an overflow out the hill, which the 1966 plan shows. This was uncovered during the construction and the removal of that, and the neighbors below us were concerned, and they came out and they gave us a stop work order and told us to remove it. And now the cost of adding the additional drainage is something the owner's incurring. So, and I would, again, argue with the concern of pollutants going out the pipe and down the hill and potentially into a waterway is a lot worse, in my opinion, than having it confined to the bottom of a basin where it could be remediated at a future date.
That's the part that we're trying to understand.
Okay.
Is how do we know?
Well,
I think that's the question. I think it's great that we're not going to send runoff, which clearly has whatever, some cars dripping going down into some residential neighborhood. I think that's a good thing. We're not going to do that. But we oughta, and we don't have the ability to do this, I don't think, that's why I was asking out legislation that exists from some other place, DEC, et cetera, that has a better opportunity to regulate these type of facilities, where they actually have, monitoring, et cetera.
Well, that's the monitoring of the tanks and the toxic material.
So we'll know, right in the runoff, and that's gonna.
My question was, you said that use of dry wells is not recommended, or, it's for clarification.
In the stormwater design manual, they have selection matrices that, based on what your land use is, it goes through the different practices, and, infiltrating in a hot spot, they call it, is not ideal.
So,
But, yeah, that then,
I mean, I understand you already have dry wells, so I'm not trying, so my question was, what's the next level? And you mentioned the next level up of technology would be to use like a pre-treat, some sort of filter or something? Or?
I get, the sticky part is they're not obligated by this, so they don't have the disturbance limits for the state to enforce this. If they were under the state guidelines, this would be called a redevelopment. They could use, they're calling Vortec units, catch basin filter, to pre-treat the water.
Hold on, my other question would be, we have a gas station, this has been a gas station for years and years and years. If someone's going out and building a brand new gas station today, what would be the technology required? Would that be?
It depends on the site.
On the location, if you were building a new station here, you'd have to do this, because there's no stormwater system.
And you have to use dry wells of some sort, it depends on the amount of runoff on a site, just,
By the way, we just let one adjourn, it's gonna be in the same place.
And that one does, just for reference, they have multiple treatment units before a detention system, which doesn't infiltrate it, it stores the water under the pavement and slowly releases it. So that mitigates their peak flow without an infiltration component.
And I think one of the confusions for me today and at the last meeting is that there was an existing outflow overflow, right? And maybe there was confusion about whether you installed it or whether it was there. I think there was. But, so you removed that.
Yes.
And the new system has some kind of overflow.
No.
No?
No?
No.
So it just bubbles up through, if there is
No.
any kind of total rain event where the dry wells fill up.
If it's the coming of, if it's the 40 days and 40 nights of flooding, yes.
Well, which storm? Let's put some number. Is it the 100-year storm, 100%?
That's happening every 10 years now?
I think we use the 5 or 10 year storm only because of site constraints.
Well, that answered that question.
Well, but the last 5 or 10 years, they're pretty wet.
But I think,
Clearly, you're only required to use the data that you're required to use. But I think most engineering, architecture, design professionals recognize the fact that the rain events we're seeing today are different than the rain events that have been forecasted. There's science to this, the pattern that we're seeing. So the answer to my question, I think, is yes. When the capacity of that retention system is reached, the overflow comes back up through.
it would bubble out the lowest catch basin, which is on the south side of the site, and it would probably pond a little on the site and eventually go over the apron and into the street if it was a catastrophic failure.
That was the answer I was thinking. It's not going to the neighbors, it's going towards the street.
No, so the back of the property, if we could put the site plan back up, the back of the development, let's call it, there is a 40 to 50 foot buffer between us and the neighbors. That is essentially the peak of the slope. And some of the extra, if you want to call it extra disturbance over by the trash enclosure removal, was to create a high point to keep our water on our
Okay.
site from the paved areas.
So in the lower right-hand corner, is
Yes,
that the lower?
left,
that-
lower
That's gonna be the default overflow.
I believe so,
I
yeah.
got it. Okay, that's what we're trying to get to.
And I would say, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but we're probably adding 5 times the capacity of what's there today.
Okay.
And the overflow that everyone was confused about because it was buried,
Right.
was clogged, and that's why we replaced it, wasn't even functioning. So,
Okay.
Did we say that there is no storm system out the road in the area? That's what I thought. That would be something like that.
Yep. Catch basins all over. Okay. Any other questions? Comments for today? Any comment from the public?
Leilani, do you want to say
There-
something?
we didn't finish going through
Okay.
the points. I
Okay.
mean, I'm happy to stop if you
Oh,
want.
no, we actually have somebody, I think, here from the AC, so it might just be.
Hi.
One of the items that you guys, or that was not, we focused on the dry wells, and our, oops, pardon me. You know, our point with the dry wells is to recognize that's the only real solution to do on the site because of the way that the water drains. With the water, any overflow draining onto the street, because of where the station is situated, the street drainage would then pour right down towards the Hudson, because you have the beach road, which immediately goes straight down towards the Hudson. And that, you know, with our concern with the local waterfront revitalization program, our concern is that that violates the spirit of that particular revitalization program, is trying to prevent potentially contaminated or polluted water from flowing into the Hudson. So that was what our concern with the dry wells is that our recommendation would be that while we can't not use the dry wells, it would be a simple matter of adding filtrations. I mean, yes, a quick Google search brought up, you know, a lot of dry wells, especially in gas stations, can be lined with filtration, simple filtration devices like activated charcoal, a layer of rocks at the bottom to help catch contaminants before and allow them to evaporate properly before you have overflow or overflow. Also, one of the items that was concerned with us with the dry wells is I believe it was the city engineer, his report mentioned that he would strongly recommend we do deep percolation tests of where the dry wells are going to be situated to ensure that as they drain and evaporate down to the ground, they're not actually draining into water, or, you know, underground water systems in that hill. And I don't think that has been done yet. I forget which engineer, it's included in the packet.
Oh, yeah, that was one of our comments. It's standard when you infiltrate, because there's state requirements that you have to be 3 feet above groundwater and ledge rock. So, and then also percolate testing to, one, make sure it drains, and then if any sizing calculations were done to verify that they are as they say they are.
And Brian, so that's strictly for design purposes, correct? The percolation test?
Right. If you go
to ensure that the design is correct and to give some information for the design.
And that it meets the state codes for separation to rock and water.
Okay. Can you, I'm sorry, what was your name?
Leilani?
Leilani?
Leilani, yes.
She's asking for filters and she's asking for treatment. What she doesn't understand is this is not we're not discharging to an open body water. It is all retention, it's not detention. And the filtration systems that she's speaking of are typically on detention systems where there will be a discharge to an open body. If I put a charcoal filter on my structure and there's a catastrophic flood and it's not gonna stop the contaminants that are on my site from getting out because it's in the ground. Is that a fair assessment?
It's fair, but again, usually there's a maintenance component to these, maintenance and monitoring.
We're talking about the catastrophic failure. Her concern is that pollutants don't get into the Hudson.
Sir, let me just make one point. I know you keep saying her concern. The EAC.
The EAC, I'm
No,
sorry.
I need to make this point because I
Absolutely.
think you're missing it. The EAC, by village code and by state law, is obligated to do this review. You were
Understood.
there. So it's not she said.
I
The
apologize.
EAC came in with a lengthy recommendation letter, most of which were agreed to by our own engineers. And they have an extensive section dealing with plantings and everything that needs to be done in the fencing. So I just want it clear that when you, I know you don't mean it disparagingly, when you say she, the EAC gave a lot of thought to this, and you were there, and we had other people come in, and they gave a very detailed letter in terms of the recommendations, because that's one of their primary charges under the code, is to do that when they get a referral. So I just want that to be clear.
And we do understand, the EAC definitely understands that we're kind of coming in a little late in the process with this, because unfortunately, when this matter was first brought before you guys, the EAC was not able to form a quorum to review this. So this was our first opportunity to take a look at this proposal and provide feedback under our under our charter. So I understand that there's frustration on the client part because they're midway through the project, and we certainly respect and understand that, but we still have to do our jobs.
But I think there's a point, and I try to get to that at the beginning, is that there are regulations that drive it. And ultimately, the question you're asking is, are we complying with the regulations that exist today?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, we're not, then it's an obligation of the village to have that complied.
Correct.
We can't make up something that doesn't exist. We need legislation if it was going to change it. I'm not sure the local law could do that, but I don't know that. That's up to the lawyer. So, but right now, the question between our consultants and the applicant is, have we done everything that the law requires? That's a simple question. And I think the answer is you've got some things to respond to. And if there, and if it's missing, you gotta do it. Right? So let's get, as John would say, let's get to the facts.
Right. So I guess the big outstanding issue is just that it is to perform the testing, make sure it's a feasible system.
The percolation test, I'm not objecting to. I understand why that's necessary.
Okay, so what's the?
The EAC's concern and charter, right, is making sure, they want to make sure nothing gets into the Hudson. I can't say if there's this 1,000-year flood, I can't say I can keep it on my site.
No, okay, I'm not talking about for the EAC, I'm talking about our engineering review. And if you're putting something in the ground that you say will mitigate the storm, you have to prove that it's a viable practice. So
Okay, agreed.
Okay.
I think that's where we are.
Okay.
And then, sorry,
No, that's okay.
quickly address the.
I just want to make sure that, well, you get all the.
I think we're
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of discussing points D and E.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
And I move on to, just like with the last three, or, excuse me, points F, where we discuss kind of more of the, what is it? With the plantings and our recommendations for kind of not, beautifying the site, but as well as also using native plants and plantings to help alleviate potential neighborhood disruptions such as light pollution and noise pollution from the gas station. I do recognize, the EAC did recognize that this gas station has been in operation for a very long time, and there hasn't been a huge impact on the neighborhood as far as noise pollution and whatnot. But with the increased volume of traffic on 9A and the fact that this would be a 24-hour open gas station, we recommended strongly that they put, especially along the back fence, which directly,
Okay.
that they use large native trees or shrubs to help absorb sound and light pollution, as well as with having shrubs and root system in the back there will also help to capture rainwater and just prevent further degradation of that slope. As you know, with the construction we're seeing, we are seeing some reduction of the slope grade itself. So that was something else we wanted to make sure that was brought to attention, is that we do that, and that they focus on using native plants rather than bring in,
I think we can all agree to that. I mean,
Yeah.
I certainly, that we want to have, it's a very bleak area
Yes.
of North Highland. And if we can at least have the circumference of your station have a nice background that also has some functionality. I think it would be a very good thing, and I certainly, if I could, would require that of every gas station we have on the strip, that they have a background of natural vegetation. So I'm in complete agreement with that.
Okay, I would say we do have a natural background of a buffer. I'm unclear, is the EAC requesting the plantings in the disturbed area or along the entire back? I know they're talking about the rear, not the perimeter.
Right.
Rear, yeah.
Okay,
Basically, we're thinking along the entire back fence.
okay. Is it behind the fence or in front of the fence?
In front of the fence.
In front of the fence.
And also to the north, I think. are the
Yeah.
ones.
So,
To the north.
Near where Dee Dee's is.
Yes, so to help like recover the disturbed area, but then also, I think we also were thinking of taking along the fence that you got, the new fence you'll have to build, of basically, you have fence and then the layer of shrub plants, native plantings to just, again, help absorb,
I have my two concerns. One concern is if it's just planting some additional plantings in the area that is actually, it was cleared prior, we didn't take any trees down, it was just sort of graded.
Yeah.
I don't see an issue with that. But if you want them all along the back, there's existing tree canopies over there, I have a concern about arborvitae surviving, as well as there is a guide rail there that is basically protecting, I guess, vehicles from going down that hill. If we're going to disturbing that slope there, then it basically drops off. We're gonna disturb the slope now, or are you telling me I gotta bring my
So
pavement line in?
what's there?
What's there now, if you go back to the survey, there's a fence and a guide rail.
You have the pictures that we also.
We have some pictures
We
earlier,
have pictures,
yes.
we have pictures that were actually taken by, we had a code enforcement officer go out there this
Okay.
week. So if you'd like to, we can
Yeah,
put
let's
them
see.
up.
Let's put
Yes,
those up,
I would
yeah.
like to see
That'd
that.
be nice.
Well, and so the site plan we saw a few seconds ago,
Yes.
there were refinements on that site plan that are revisions from the previous site plan?
Correct, this is actually an amended site plan
Right.
approval.
And so before we lose track, I want to come back and revisit what those are.
So that's interesting in the front. Let's look at that.
Yeah, that will be cleaned up. We're also
Oh, I-
close to getting our DOT permits to redo the sidewalks.
So there.
Yeah, that doesn't really tell us much. That's just the dry wells.
But I think it tells us a
See,
lot,
yeah,
okay?
Okay.
Because that sort of tells me, what are they, about 4 feet high, those detention?
Yep.
yeah.
So there's nothing higher than 4 feet.
Well, they're going to be stacked. What's
No,
not,
no,
what's,
there's nothing higher. If I were to look to the right, where the light pole is, right, that's what we're talking about.
He's talking about the height of the vegetation,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Over the-
Right.
So there's nothing going.
well, it drops off, so,
Yeah,
yeah, the
right.
grade drops off.
So along there, I'm not sure what you would do, quite frankly. Like, you know.
That's the only photograph here?
that
No, we have,
would get
We have
it-
Google Earth, if
that
you
would get it
zoom
tight
to
and
Google Earth.
I mean,
So there's, you know, I mean.
We could spend the whole night over this.
But you're gonna be replacing a 6-foot fence that was
Right.
knocked down at some point,
Correct.
but you're gonna be putting a new.
A portion of it's been knocked down, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
There you go. So still, it's still the same.
It-
There's really nothing,
Right.
there's really no buffer. there.
And unless
Well,
I'm
go back,
mistaken.
can you go back two pictures? I mean, if you go back to that picture on the right there, I mean, the area in the foreground is the area that was disturbed to grade. But you can kind of see in the background, the vegetation is quite lush, and there's the undergrowth
Yeah.
under those trees.
I guess, and it drops off pretty fast. The problem with that vegetation is it's scrub stuff,
Yeah.
right?
It's natural.
Well, it's
And
weeds, more or less.
Yeah,
So, and they're not there in the winter,
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay? And so, one of the, you know, by the way, and I don't want to prolong this, but I actually was on the planning board when this got approved the first time. And we were very clear that after 11 o'clock at night, the lights got down to about 5 candle power.
That is a condition of the approval.
Okay. So that it didn't,
Your approval
spread.
has legacy and legs, Joe.
Actually, I would say the concern was not so much the neighbors to the rear, given the distance, but the neighbors across the
Right,
street.
Exactly, yeah, because if you do some, geometry, you'll find out that most people can't see the canopy at all from down.
Yes.
So, but nonetheless, I think
This
it's
is the low hanging fruit. This is the easy part.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the Highland Avenue sidewalk, and it's what's gonna happen between your revised and recast site plan at Dee Dee's.
Yeah.
And out of those two, I think I indicated this before, this is not so much for you, but this is for us. We're gonna take a marginal situation and make it better, we're gonna take a marginal situation, we're gonna make it much worse. And right now, we've taken the needle and moved it to, let's make it much worse. So, our success here on trying to move the needle ain't so good on this one, if we're still on the site plan that that was on the screen before, I think. And this is not so much on you as the applicant, because I understand there was a border property line dispute and history, and speaking of legacy, before you got here. But this is where, here we are, we're either gonna make a difference here or not.
And what do you suggest?
Well, let's go back to the photograph. Maybe let's go to your site plan first. So do I understand?
Wait, that's the survey, that's existing conditions? Yeah, there you go.
The graphic for the chain link fence is not shown on the property line by default, or is there a dimension that you're proposing moving this back?
The owner wants it on the property
And
And
why,
that's sort of a vindictive.
line. I'm not sure the motive for it.
why a chain link fence? What is wrong with concrete round planters that forms the same kind of barrier? I mean, what is it with chain link? It is horrendous, and you can still create a full obstruction that says, this is my property here, and on the other side, we have something else.
Well, yeah, it's visual, are we being good neighbors here? And apparently not, or at least you're inferring that the intent is kind of punitive here. And then is a business that's getting traction and that we're happy about now gonna have their primary circulation diminished? Even though it was happening by default before. So, I don't wanna make a bigger deal out of this than it is and ignore this, or ignore this, but this is where we make a difference, right?
Yeah.
I can, I guess I wasn't aware that it was, I knew it was a concern. I thought,
I'm telling you, if I come
I can go
down-
back to the owner and ask him about planters.
If I come down
He's
North
reasonable.
Highland and I have 3 gas stations to choose from, there's one thing I say, price, cleanliness, and appeal. And it's any combination of those 3 that makes me go into the one. If there was appeal, I would much rather go there. And I tell you, it's only a few cents extra to fill my tank, but that would make a difference.
And a sign that said, "We are good neighbors."
Well,
Right.
but I do think that I don't know of any board that looks favorably on chain link fences.
Yeah, no chain link
No,
fence.
no.
So that,
Definitely no. I mean, we can vote this right here now. No chain link
Is
fence.
estate fencing nicer?
I think you can, and I get the, I
How
get
about
the
no
problem.
fence?
It's
I get
bad
the
for
problem
us.
of
Posting rail fence?
There's a problem with maintenance, I get it, there's upgrade, and, get
Or no
things-
fence, why do you need a fence?
Well,
Well, planters,
Well,
something, if you wanted to eliminate.
Well, that's what I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, the EEC recommended planting,
Yeah.
So,
turning that into a natural barrier.
we can talk about
I'm not being
It's okay.
naive, I mean, there's no reason for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I think there might be. But anyway, they can work that out. But right now, we need something along the rear. You already said you're gonna clean up that jungle you got in the front. And then some other more aesthetic treatments between the property lines, or however you choose to do it.
Okay.
You know, it has to be higher than a curb, because people will jump the curb. Okay. We're good. Enough to digest?
Yes, so
Okay.
what happens from here, I guess?
So, I think
You're gonna
clean it up.
adjourn, you want me to come back with a revised site plan?
Yep, yep. And
Okay.
then make sure you and Ryan agree on
The
sign.
curb
Yes,
needs to be better, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's easy.
Okay.
Okay?
Super, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn.
Thanks.
All right, 121 Main, 25 Cedar Lane? Are you 25 Cedar Lane? Okay. Yeah, this is subdivision. Okay, so you just want, pre-approval, no change?
No changes from the previous approval. Except I just want to make one thing clear, I mean, I became involved several months after this thing was approved, you know, in February of last year. I just want to emphasize that, you know, there are going to be 2 sewer easements on here, and that's what this note pertains to. And over here, and I discussed this, you know, with the village attorney, the village engineer. So there'll be a temporary easement represented by the yellow, and a permanent. We cannot, I cannot forecast where that permanent easement will be based on the commercial site plan. I'm just saying that this was, for some reason, this was a major sticking point last time. I just want to emphasize that, so.
We gave particular language that can go, so we're okay with it tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, any questions? Any questions from the public? No, motion to approve the extension?
So we're just approving the extension of the pre-existing
Yeah,
approval.
we
we
approve
did.
this one. Right.
I'll make the motion.
I second.
Is there a reason why this wasn't executed? I mean, it's just a subdivision.
Right, and when you execute, you mean filed?
It could take years, yeah.
There was a, that's a very sensitive issue. There's an issue with the sanitary sewer.
Initially, I'm
This is
the owner. Initially, someone forgot that my house had a sewer, and then that came up, and then it just.
So they went to file the plat with the county.
Yeah.
There was issues
So then-
with the
Got it,
plat.
okay.
But I think we figured it out.
Okay.
I just have a question, just, I mean, should the easements be shown on here? Do you want-
Eventually, it's gonna be shown on a drawing
And before
file
the-
with the county.
Before the chairman signs it, should the easements be physically shown on here, or is it just this note gonna suffice? Or is that something?
Why don't you get it done?
Get it done, and
Should
then-
we done on this
yeah,
search?
yeah, then we'll get it signed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. 145 North Highland Ave. There.
I know the hour's late, Mr. Chairman. Did the board want to take a break?
No, let's go.
Just want to make sure.
This should be like 5 minutes, right?
Whatever you prefer, Mr. Chairman. That sounds good to
I mean,
me.
it's just how you're gonna, you know, get the 3 acres, right?
So-
visit why you're here. You're right to what we need to.
So we're here before you with basically the plan for the reuse, the adaptive reuse of the existing building at 145 North Highland. As you'll recall from our prior appearances before you as part of the zoning amendment proceeding, Cardinal McCluskey owns and maintains a facility adjacent to the property and is in contract to purchase the 145 North Highland property from Executive Properties, whose attorney Anthony Monteleone is here tonight. We've provided you a site plan with some proposed minor modifications to the site. There's no proposed changes to the existing building, which is the former rectory of the church that was there, but that was demolished in the 70s. There's an existing parking area which we've proposed to restripe and provide some small planters, and then some planting along the front of the premises. We have received the comment memo from Kellard Sessions, and we actually, just by way of background, we thought we had an engineer engaged as soon as the amendment was passed in January. Time went on, and they were actually not responsive, unfortunately. So we hired DMI Architects, and they're engaging an engineer to be able to answer those questions, and we should be able to do that. The one question that did come up, there are existing light poles. If you enter onto the property this way, there's small light poles, light stanchions that light the parking area. There are, so originally, when the architects originally had this, they actually had the property is actually ends here, North Highland is here, and then this property in here is still owned by the state of New York, although I've since learned that Cardinal McCluskey actually basically mows it and takes care of it. But it is the state's. So originally they'd had the trees here, and then I had them move them back here. Appropriately, it was noted that the light poles are actually in the front here, which I'm sure they can be relocated to the edge of the parking area if the landscaping is something that the board wants. If the board doesn't like the landscaping and we don't want to keep this here, then we would not have to move the light poles. But there are two small light poles. I think they're about 6 feet high. They're fairly small. They're actually there's a picture of one in the drawings. You can actually see it right there.
I think we're okay with the lights.
Where it is? Okay. So other than that, I believe we do have to clarify the number of parking spaces. We've calculated that we need 10. I think this drawing ended up only showing 13 because I believe there was actually extra spaces out here that got taken out by the architect, and the number didn't change. But I think there was also consideration that they could put a couple of spaces over here. So I'm actually going to clarify that for you.
Yeah, our comments are very minor in nature, and just no showstoppers.
It was a good pickup, though. I hadn't realized it, and I apologize for that.
So Daniel, those are proposed, right? They're not existing today?
In the front here?
Configuration is?
That would be proposed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were looking to buffer it. That's the way the code reads. It does look for landscape buffering. I would note that sort of the other adjoining properties, if you look sort of to, and we have to add a north arrow actually, but if you look sort of above the building to the left and above the building to the right, where the other adjoining properties are, that's where it actually slopes down, and so the properties around sort of to the back, to the rear of the building are actually lower. There is fencing there, and it does drop down. We could actually put landscaping back there as well. It seemed redundant since we're already fenced. There's actually fencing that's back there and retaining walls that kind of rises from Montgomery Street. But we could put some landscaping back there as well if necessary. But overall, the function of the building is, you really wouldn't have a whole lot of activity in that back area. The idea would be, the people coming and going would be in the parking lot in the front and toward the side.
Is that specific, I can't.
Sorry.
Is the planting noted, specific, the species and blah, blah, blah?
So the idea would be that it would be a mix of burning bush and probably white pines.
Burning bush?
No.
That's appropriate for an old church.
You can't put burning bush in.
Okay.
I mean, that's
Uh-oh.
considered an invasive species. It
Oh.
is not something you would want to put in.
Okay.
And burning bush
I
is
did-
also deciduous, so you'll have empty branches in the wintertime.
Okay.
We have two different plants up there. Would you prefer the evergreen?
Well, no, it was ideally it would be a mix of something with the pine. So obviously burning bush is out.
Yeah, that's out.
That's fine.
Not to drill into this too much, but I am married to a landscape architect. Could we scroll up a little bit? The regular spacing, the AB, all same, is also kind of an invasive landscape composition.
Mhm.
It's like movie theater in Iowa, kind of. I think, and that's a pretty prominent knoll, right?
It
So there's some composition there, I think, that would lend towards composing landscape on that knoll that's not so boom, 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 boom.
and maybe hire someone to do that.
Oh, I'm not suggesting that.
No, I'm suggesting it.
I'm just thinking that there's an opportunity there, and you've started down the road, and I think with some minor adjustments, not even talking about scope adjustments, it's a completely different landscape, if you will.
Understood.
And you
mentioned those other areas.
Multiplex, movie theater screening.
And it's gotta be
Right, well, that
20
kind
feet
of
above the
rigid.
Yeah, it goes up at least 15, yeah, I think it's
It's a
change in
long way
elevation.
Yeah.
It's a decent view of the building.
I mean,
But you'd mentioned those other areas around the back of the site. Are those impervious or are those currently,
No, that's grass.
so they're currently grass?
That's grass area, but then it goes back to a fence area, so,
Okay, so you have, so basically they're not
there's like
impervious.
stockade, like if you look at the building and towards the, up to the left, upper left, there's a stockade fence in that corner.
I can't tell from this photo, are the existing trees, vegetation that's there, is that on the forward, on the part owned by the state, or is that on your property? I can't.
That's further, I think that's further back. Part of it is actually, I think, on the adjoining parcel, and I think part of it is over here,
Well,
in
yeah.
between the access drive and the parking area.
Okay, so,
Right,
okay,
that's-
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think it wasn't
So what you're
picked up on the
proposing
survey.
is all forward on the hill,
Right.
even somewhat down
On
from
the-
its.
Or on the
rise
crest
point.
almost, right?
Well, yeah, so there's existing, the existing parking area actually comes down further, so the idea is to kind of actually pull that back a little bit from the knoll and then landscape that area. I think that was sort of the objective, but not with anything, it wasn't the objective to put invasive species in there, so we will have to adjust that.
Dan, I just have one question that relates to the easement.
Sure, certainly.
I believe you indicated that if 155 sells, the easement extinguishes. So my concern is that if that were to happen, then it's only .85.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, if 145, if 145 was ever conveyed, that's what I think that was the intent. I'm sorry, I may
No,
have.
because I thought it,
I may have.
because I just want to be clear that, because you have, it is planned that should Carter McCluskey ever always sell 145 easements? Okay, I apologize, you're right. So in other words, you would need it then, because at that point.
Right, so
Okay.
if we would.
But if
need it.
155 sells, it's running with the land?
It would still run
so
with the
we're
land.
continuing
It would still be recorded.
Question
and run
answered,
with the
thank you.
land. Yeah.
all right.
And just so you know too, I did discuss with with our client, the possibility, I've worked on these matters before, you can never know how the Department of Transportation, I'm not sure if New York State DOT actually still needs this property anymore. And I'm actually gonna conduct an investigation.
Probably
to
the
see.
right of way.
It's possible, but sometimes they determine it's surplus. So I'm actually gonna take a look, but that usually takes months to answer, so I wouldn't have the answer for you now. But it's something we are gonna explore just in case.
To plant into that area possibly.
Plant into that area or incorporate it into the lot. And then in that case, we would actually come back and seek to extinguish the easement, because then the lot would actually meet the requirement in total.
Perfect, sounds like a plan.
But that would be easy.
Thank you, Dave.
Super, thank you.
Okay? So we'll be back next month, hopefully with answers for
Right,
you.
what we're really looking for is conditional approval from your board based on the code. And then we'll be happy to meet all of your requests as far as landscape and everything else.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, can we just?
Can we be quiet
Hey,
for a
hey.
moment?
Well,
We still have a meeting, it's all right.
But without an official vote, there is no such thing as conditional approval.
Right.
That's right.
So,
Okay.
but I think we have our marching orders.
Yep. And this is pretty straightforward now.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And that, I think, we need a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second. All in favor? Those that were here?
Aye.
Opposed? Nobody? Carried. Okay. Do we carry?
Jamie, that's a 5-0, because Kaya wasn't here the last meeting.
Okay. So do we have to discuss the historic architectural design?
No, there is a public hearing on the 9th regarding the HPC's application, their own application to designate Ellis Place as a historic district. So that's on July the 9th. And just as a reminder, on July the 10th, after you have your work session, there will be the joint meeting with the DOT and the ZBA regarding affordable. That's all will be at the community center, the Arc So,
In the art room?
Art room.
The big one down there?
No, the art room is upstairs.
It's upstairs?
So if we approve
Wellness
it,
place, would that fall under the same kind of conditions as the Main Street facade and the Sparta Historic District? So the same kind of conditions?
Yep.